Welcome back, everyone. Another episode of Coffee with the Commish, continuing our tour of Major League Baseball leading up to opening day. We're doing 30 teams in 30 days, continuing with the American League East. In this particular video, bringing in one of the sharpest guys that I know, especially when you consider that he does everything for free on his Twitter account. Big Tampa Bay Rays fan. Welcome, my guy, B-Flo, to the show.
Hey, thanks, Commish. Thanks for having me. I'm really excited, talk about Rays ball and just baseball overall. I'm ready for baseball season, but thank you for that. And by the way, Commish, one of the best out there. So if you are watching this and you're not following, that's the guy you want to follow. So
I appreciate it, man. I know I definitely picked up a few extra dollars in my bank account last year, thanks to our DMs, thanks to the information that we share. So
yes.
Looking forward to doing it again. But man, let's just dive right in. I know this is your team. We talked a little bit before we jumped on. This is like your team, right? In any sport,
Yeah.
in any market, like it's the Tampa Bay Rays for you, right?
Everything, man. Everything. I mean, I love the Bucks. I love the Lightning. The anything that's Tampa, but the Rays are the team that I live for sure.
Yeah. Well, give me your thought process, just generally speaking, and then we'll dive into the pitching staff, and then we'll go through the hitters. But give me your thoughts, generally speaking. Kevin Cash back again with the team. They're coming off 4 consecutive playoff appearances. They made it to the World Series in that COVID shortened campaign. 100-win season in 2021, regressed a little bit last year, but still made the postseason. Things obviously didn't go as desired in the playoffs, but bringing pretty much the whole band back together. And last year, I think a lot of injuries that resulted in that 86 and 76 campaign. How do you feel about 2023?
I mean, I was just mentioning to you right before we get on, and I saw your thing on the bottom, 88.5 wins. Too low. I do think I'm excited because I feel like we've had, in our terms, from a fan perspective and just from everything that you can think of, we had a disappointing season. Like it is what it is. Like we coming off the really good season the year before, having Wander Franco make his debut, like we had a lot of expectations to at least 90 wins, right, and continuing that streak. So 86 wins, and then the playoffs was just disappointing. So overall, the season to me was disappointing, right? But still a winning record, right? It still made the playoffs, which was good experience for a lot of our guys. But I'm excited. I think this year is a big year for us. I think we're going to bounce back. I know a lot of people, obviously, when they talk about the Rays, they typically just think pitching, right? Because that's what the Rays do over the last 4 or 5 years. I mean, even beyond that, it's been our bread and butter. And our pitching, again, it's ridiculous this year. We have some guys in
Probably the most
AAA.
raw talent that you've had, right? Like Tampa Bay has really made its mark on baseball because
Yeah.
they turn a bunch of nobodies into stars or relief aces, et cetera, et cetera. But this year you got Eflin, you got McClanahan, Glasnow. I know he's going to be on the shelf to start the season, but there's some legitimate talent here and potentially more on the way coming out of the minor leagues.
Yeah, man. I mean, it's just one of those things. We have to give credit. It starts at AA, AAA. The farm system is just really, really good. And the Rays target a specific type of pitcher. I don't know if you noticed over the past few years, they target big guys with big fastballs and big sliders, right? Those are the guys that they go for. Like all over bullpen, I mean, these guys are nasty, fastball with a disgusting slider. That's kind of what they've been really going for. And that is continuing to trend that way. But I think offensively, what I'm really excited about offensively, I mean, we only had 2 guys and hit 20 home runs last year. I mean, and that was Randy Arozarena and Isaac Paredes. No one expected Paredes to hit 20 home runs, right? So, I mean, to me, that's offensively, that was just a disaster of a season, So I'm excited about just the offense. I think helping the pitching a little bit more this season. So I think 90 wins easily. I mean, that's what I'm expecting from this team. 90 wins. That's my expectation. I mean, anything above that, great. but at least kind of like that 90 win is kind of what I'm hoping we get to.
Cool. So let me ask you before we dive in and we start looking at some of these players on an individual basis. The Rays entering the season again, they're 27th in payroll. You look at the teams that they're outspending. They're outspending the Pittsburgh Pirates, widely expected to be one of the worst teams in baseball. The Baltimore Orioles, who have been one of the worst teams in baseball and now have a bunch of their premier talent on these young, cheap, inexpensive rookie deals. And then the Oakland Athletics, who I think would have a dollar menu payroll if Major League Baseball would allow it, if they could still field a Major League Baseball team. As a fan, because I know you do a lot from a betting perspective as well, but just as a fan of the Tampa Bay Rays, how do you feel about the team's unwillingness or inability to spend because you keep winning? So, like, there's a lot of outside people that say the Tampa Bay Rays are cheap, that they're everything that's wrong with baseball. From your perspective, just as a fan, how do you feel about the payroll on a year-to-year basis?
You know, it comes down to a couple of things. So, number one, why would you change something that's working, right? Obviously, they've been relying on their farm system, the way they draft, and the scouting department, on everything that comes with that. Every time the Rays make a trade, we typically come out on the better end of that deal, right? A lot of times, it's rare for a Rays trade to be like, oh man, we got jib, right? It doesn't happen.
Makes teams not want to trade with you, right? Every time I see a breaking news story that the Rays have been involved in something, I'm like, that doesn't look right, but I guarantee that guy's going to come. He's going to start throwing 95. He's going to have a slider, start getting a 35% whiff rate.
Exactly. So, so there's that. And then from the second part of that is, I don't think nothing's going to change until we get that new stadium, right? I don't think Stu, the owner is willing to spend a lot of money, knowing that he probably has his big expense coming up with the stadium. He's going to have to put up quite a bit of chunk of his part if he wants to make it happen. Kind of upset that we're staying in the St. Petersburg area. From what I've seen, I think they're going to remodel the whole area there and try to keep the Rays there. I was hoping they would come down to the other side of the bridge. If you've never been to Tampa Bay, the Rays are not really in Tampa; they're in St. Petersburg, right? So two different cities, and it's a ride to get to there. So yeah, we just don't have the revenue to spend big. I know we've been winning, but even when we're winning, you're having an attendance with 10,000 people. You know what I mean? Against, another team that maybe, let's say the Mariners were a really solid team, and then you're getting that series in the middle of the week, and you're averaging 10,000 fans. Not really a recipe for you to spend a lot of money and just, give out big contracts to whoever you want. So, we'll see. We'll see what happens. The talks of the stadium continue to heat up, and I think it's going to happen pretty soon. So I think maybe that will change kind of the trajectory when it comes to that and the spending. But for now, I don't see that changing. And as a fan, I'm okay with it. And listen, there's nothing that I go to about 10 games a season, probably more, 10 to 15, and I'm like the exception. Most people go to 1 or 2, right? But from a fan, you can't really complain if you're not supporting the team. You know what I mean? It's kind of hard for me to hear people like, "Oh, Stu's cheap," and so. You don't even make the drive to go watch the Rays, and when they're giving out tickets for $5. So like, don't complain that they're not spending when you can't even go and spend $5 to go to the game and support. Right?
Yeah,
so you can have it both ways.
It's an interesting point that you bring up because, like, I'm from Cleveland, right? In Cleveland, I think it's talked about in a lot of the same ways that the Rays do sometimes, where we have an owner that is incredibly cheap, always claims to not have a lot of money, but the Cleveland fan base is a lot more robust. We have a really big metropolitan area. It's easy to get in and out of downtown. Parking is not very bad. So when we don't spend money after we have relatively good attendance, after we win games, stuff like that, it can get a little bit more frustrating. But it's an interesting point. It's an interesting point for sure.
Yeah. And it's going to continue, man. That's I think what we're doing, we're just smart. Everything we do from an organization perspective, everything is calculated. The moves that we make, who we keep, who we let go, and so forth. So, and that's just going to continue.
I think you're right, and This I think is a good segue into top of the rotation. Shane McClanahan, a guy, high draft pick, someone who's making next to nothing, and finished sixth in the American League Cy Young voting last year, and probably would have finished higher if he didn't deal with some injuries down the stretch last year. What do you make of a guy like this who is so young? He came into the league, he struggled a little bit against right-handed batters, but then last season came back, altered his pitch mix a little bit, especially against right-handed batters. We can see what he did here, and he took this slider usage down from about 33%, introduced a curveball, a lot more of the changeup, really had a trio of offerings that he used roughly the same amount of time. McClanahan appears to be healthy this season, third year in the big leagues, coming off of a season in which he dominated pretty much every time he went out there. What are you expecting from him? What are you hoping to see from him this year?
Yeah, man. Fun fact. So I've been watching Shane since he was in USF. He went to USF. I went to USF. So I watched him pitch in college as well, and I knew in college that the dude was going to go big time. So when the Rays got him, I was excited. I knew right away that he was going to last long in the minor leagues, and he was going to make pretty quick ascent to the majors. But it comes down to health with him, man. At the end of the day, he's going to. I think he's going to continue to get better in terms of, his pitching style, his mixing pitches. Our pitching coach is just outstanding. I mean, he just everything that he does with all of our pitchers to change this, change that, pitching selections and stuff. He's great. But I think it just comes down to health. I think the way how we manage him, throughout a long season, because I think he started to wear down, man, a lot after the second half of the season. And this is someone he already has a Tommy John under his belt, right? That right out of college or in college. He's dealt with some arm issues, shoulder issues last year. So I think it's a matter of how do we manage that, and I think that's why I'm so excited about the pitching depth that we have, because I think we're going to be able to maybe skip a couple starts here and there for him and have like someone like Chirinos come in and do a spot start and give him a little bit of a break in between. But I think the next step really is going to be continue to assign in the Cy Young ladder. There's no reason for me to believe that he's going to go backwards unless it's something health related. I've watched him a couple of times. I've watched his first spring inning start. He looked great. I mean, spring training is just for getting your feel out, your fastball. Today I'm going to work on my fastball. And a lot of people are like, oh my God, he pitched terrible. But hey, he's just probably working on one pitch for that start. You know what I mean?
Yeah. They don't care about the results. He's going out there. He says, I want to make sure I can command my fastball. I want to, like you said, feel the baseball in my hand again, off speed stuff.
Get out healthy, get your pitches in, get your routine again. And that's something that, I think overall, I'm expecting the same Shane, if not better. He should be our ace, number one. I mean, Glasnow, again, it's just health, right? He's nasty when he's out there, but he's been dealing with a lot of health issues and very similar guys, both tall, lengthy, skinny guys that just kind of like let it rip. So it comes down to that to me, but the pitching depth is gonna be what really, really, really excited about. I think it's gonna help him and Shane and Tyler not to have that pressure of like being out there. Like if I'm not out there, the team's gonna lose. And this goes hand in hand with the offense, what I was mentioning earlier, right? Having that, there's gonna be games where hey, we might have to win 10-7, So that's my expectation for Shane is, I'm not going to say Cy Young because it's really hard to win a Cy. In the American League,
well, so let's put this in the betting terms then. So McClanahan 16-1 to win the Cy Young, finished sixth last year, but he got JV out of the American League, going over to the Mets. So really, there's only a handful of guys ahead of him. Does McClanahan have value at 16-1 in your mind, or the innings limit, the workload restrictions, things of those nature? Does that make you stay away in this spot?
Yeah, I would say so. I think you're going to see a lot of that with Shane this year. I think it's going to be a lot more of cash coming out in the early fifth. taking the ball out, just kind of managing his innings as he goes into, because the ultimate goal here is playoffs, right? We want to have these guys ready to go to, a 3-game, series where we have Shane, Tyler, and that number 3 guy, right?
Mhm.
Like that's the goal. Like the Cy Young is great, but that's I don't think that's going to be what Kevin Cash is kind of thinking as the season progresses. So he might finish with less innings as a lot of these guys that might be in the top running for it. So that might be my reservation for sure when it comes to Shane. But I mean, talent wise and what he brings to the table, I mean, the dude is just filthy, just
Yeah,
filthy. He
I could not
reminds me a
agree
lot of
more.
David Price, man.
He does, and I mean, the Rays have been incredible on the pitching front going back a while now. I think
Yeah, man.
Tyler Glasnow is another one, so we can transition into him. Limited last season, coming off of the injury from the year before, but before
Mm-hmm.
he got hurt in 2021, was genuinely one of the best, if not the best pitchers in the American League prior to undergoing the knife, and really was unfortunate to see. But this is another situation where this might have been the greatest trade in Tampa Bay Rays history. This might have been one of the greatest trades from a
I know.
fleecing standpoint in the history of the
I
league.
know.
This guy comes over from the Pittsburgh Pirates. He looks like he's lost, right? You see his first 3 tastes of the big leagues, had an ERA
Yeah.
north of 5, a FIP that supported the fact that he wasn't all that great. There's not a whole lot of unluckiness coming in here. Comes to Tampa, they work on the pitch mix a little bit, turn him into a guy who looks like he's on a path to a Cy Young,
Mm-hmm.
but he still has never thrown more than 111 innings in a season. And you mentioned with McClanahan going out there in the early 5th, limiting the workload, maybe even having a guy piggyback off of him on occasion where it's a scheduled,
Yep.
hey, Shane, you're going to go through the order once, and then we're going to go to Chirinos or Patino or someone like that. Glasnow is going to miss 6 to 8 weeks now. He's not going to be on the opening day roster because of this oblique strain that he suffered during live batting practice the other day. As a Rays fan, I have to imagine that you might be sitting there a little bit like, hey, maybe we don't have to monitor his innings as much. And maybe because there's not the pressure to be on the opening day roster, maybe there's not even a ton of pressure to pitch in April when the weather's cold, when your body's not 100% loose on a trip to New York or to Boston in the Northeast.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
How do you feel about Glasnow? One, the health. I mean, it's been a couple of years now where he hasn't been able to get through a full season healthy. So the health aspect of Glasnow, but then also when he does come back, how do you feel about his ability to contribute at a high level?
I mean, it's gonna be, I as Rays fans, and if you've been following the Rays, you know that this is coming. Like there is no 7, 8, 9, complete game performances from starting pitchers happening too often, right? Over the past, ever since Kevin Cash essentially took over. Um, but it's the same thing, The good thing is, man, it's an oblique. I mean, those injuries are tough, but it has nothing to do with his arm, and it's hopefully won't linger too much after it's healed. So I'm the same on the same front as Shane, man. It comes down to him, the thing with that's a little bit different with Tyler, right? Shane showed us last year he can kind of manage a full MLB season, somewhat healthy. Obviously, he's going to have some hiccups here and there, but overall, pitched a lot of innings. Was there when called upon. With Tyler, like it's just been one of those things that we don't know. We don't really know. If he's going to come back and 6 weeks in, hey, something might pop up again. And like he's that inconsistency that's really hard with him because like when he's out there, I mean, like you said, he's elite. I mean, the dude has some again 6'10", 6'11", coming down with just that. I mean, his arm is already like almost halfway through like
Yep.
to the pitcher by the time that this ball is getting released.
Yeah, you can see
So I
this was
mean,
from 2021, like 99th percentile extension. The amount of space that he has
I
biomechanically to do
mean,
what he does is
yeah, dude.
insane,
Like
which it
that's
leads to
one of
those.
those things that people don't realize, bro. When we have a guy like that's doing that and that having that extension is that lengthy, and that ball's coming out like way closer than most pitchers are letting this ball out. And so,
Yeah.
meaning that thing is running at you at a woof. I mean, it's incredible. So, I mean, overall though, I think Tyler is gonna be. I think I think he's probably one of those guys who's going to be in the radar in terms of like really limiting and watching his innings workload as we
Mhm.
go, especially the first half of the season. I think they might kind of manage that, especially coming up, an oblique strain already, coming up through something. I think they're going to work his way back, towards the first half of the season. I think the second half, that's when they might just kind of let him, go a little bit longer starts here and there, especially September time,
Mhm.
October time. I think that's when we really then at that point kind of let him go. But my expectation is going to be for him to be there, obviously at the 2 hole, right behind Shane. When if he's healthy, um, and yeah, I mean, hopefully, man. I'm That's just with him. It's just we haven't seen him healthy, for a full
Yeah.
season. So like, I can expect him to do it this season without, just knowing his history. Like, unfortunately, that's kind of what's been flagging him ever
Mhm.
since he went with the Rays. But I'm excited for a whole rotation. I mean, whole rotation is nasty.
I agree. And Glasnow, MGM's still hanging at 20-1 to win him for him to win the Cy Young. I think that's preposterous. The guy's never thrown more
Yeah,
than 111 innings, which we mentioned. The injury to start the season, you're mentioning, which I think, well, Kevin Cash made a comment after this injury. He said verbatim almost of, well, at least now we won't have to monitor his innings as closely, so I won't be getting cursed out when I go to take him out of the game in the fifth inning.
exactly, exactly. So you already know he's definitely been one of those guys that it's really close eye on everything that he does, every innings he pitches, everything that he does is gonna be, you know, hawk's eye essentially. You know,
For sure. For sure. But you keep mentioning this depth in the rotation. Fortunately for the Rays, losing a guy like Glass now in the 2 spot on that rotation, not a death sentence, because you can build a borderline elite starting pitcher seemingly at will. Drew Rasmussen last year, they added a cutter. They said, "Hey, we're going to throw you in the rotation."
yep,
And what happens? He's in the 90th percentile in chase rate, elite command. The spin rates were
the
fantastic. Threw about 150 innings with an ERA below 3. Tell me what you liked about him last year, and can he do it again? Like, this is a guy that I think a lot of people were hesitant on a betting perspective last year, or DFS, fantasy, whatever, to think
yep.
to yourself, is this sustainable? What do you think going into
Yeah, I mean,
2023?
I think the thing with Drew that is really and I think I hadn't even looked this up, but I was actually going to bring up his spin is crazy when it comes to his fastball, right? So like he's one of those guys that he might not look like he's going to overpower you, but his ball is, I mean, some of the stuff that he has is probably, I wasn't expecting it. When he came up and he took over the starting rotation, he just kept coming up, start after start, delivering. Every time his number got called, he will go up there and just have a solid start. Like nothing spectacular at times, but nothing that would lose you the game. Just kind of got you through, to our bullpen, which again, it's gonna be one of the best bullpens in baseball again.
Mhm.
Comes this season. At least I hope. Um, but I think Drew has the tools to continue to do what he's been doing. He's the perfect number 3, number 4 guy. You know, not a guy that you're expecting it to be your number one going against, game one of a playoff series type of deal, but a very solid guy that you can rely on to at least get you through 5 innings. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Um,
and you mentioned he's a perfect number 3 guy. His last 16 starts last season had a 2.45 ERA, a 2.85 FIP. He gets ground balls at an elite rate, and when you look at
mhm,
the earned runs in this span, there's only 3 starts in here where he gave up 2 or more earned runs. And I know he's not getting into the 7th, 8th inning on a regular basis, but the point holds here of he's giving your team a chance to win every single time he takes the ball. And then he hands it to a bullpen that's up there with the best in the game. Because even a couple of these games where he got quote unquote bounced around a little bit,
yep,
4 runs against the Astros, 4 runs against the Blue Jays, 2 of the best teams offensively in baseball
correct.
last season. The Red Sox, he gave up 3 runs in 6 innings. That's still a quality start. He gave you valuable innings.
Hmm.
You're not asking him to go be an ace. And when you go back and you look at his career arc here, the guy threw 76 innings primarily out of the bullpen the year before that. We bring him back in 2022 with this this cutter that he was able to saw off lefties with, and he just got rid of the fastball. Like, this is what the Rays do so well. And I'm sure we'll talk about this as we get deeper into the rotation and the bullpen here. Of they help guys throw their best offerings more frequently, and they get them to throw pitches that aren't super effective far less often. And it's amazing how intuitive that is, how commonsensical that seems, but that the Rays are still one of the few organizations in baseball that do this kind of stuff on a consistent basis.
Yeah, man, and that's what I mean. Everything we do is smart, right? So like, we don't try to put our guys in spots that they're not going to be successful. Like, that's why a lot of times we get these pitchers from different organizations, and they're being horrible, is because they're asking them to throw this particular pitch over and over again, even though it's getting rocked and it just has no effect on it. This is our philosophy of this,
it's a philosophy of losing, staff, right? It's a philosophy of making poor decisions. Right. That's what it is.
So, the Rays bring these guys in and they just say, hey, listen, you have a really good fastball. Go ahead and throw it 95% of the time. And if that's what it takes, do that. Like, it's fine. You're going to be all right. You're going to be out there for an inning plus, maybe if that. So, like, just come in and do what you got to do. But yeah, I mean, Drew Rasmussen, then we got Jeffrey Springs right behind him, right? Which another guy that not going to go crazy and overpower you, but has some really, really good stuff. We just signed him to an extension. We actually signed a bunch of these guys. Like, talk about the Rays not spending money. We've been signing a lot of these young guys to long contracts. Not 10 years, but that they can keep the core together for at least the next 2, 3, 4 years, right?
Yeah.
And they do it smart. The same thing we're gonna do probably with Bradley as he comes up. I know you probably know about Touch Bradley. You've probably seen some of his stuff. Probably as soon as he comes up, we'll probably sign him to an extension, right away. Yep. That's what seems to be. They started doing this with Evan Longoria. Like, that's the first player that I can think of the Rays did this with. Where like he played like 10 games in the league, 8-year contract extension, right?
Yeah,
they didn't even know.
You have a good thing, right? And like, I mean, if you can buy out those arbitration years, if you can buy out the first couple of years of free agency, you end up getting the vast majority of a player's prime at a really discounted rate, because from the player's perspective, that's still a good deal for them because they haven't proven anything yet. And there's still, baseball is a very difficult game. There's always the potential that you can fall off a cliff and then not have that foundational money to live the rest of your life with, because it's hard to transition out of professional sports to go do other stuff.
Yeah, man. So it's the same thing with a lot of our position players. Like I said, I'm sure we're gonna have a couple position players come up here that I'm really excited. That's another reason I'm really excited about the offense this year. So once we talk about that's gonna be something that I mentioned. But I mean, Jeffrey Springs, again, this is a number 4 starter. You know what I mean?
And I had a 2.46 ERA last year.
So like you're getting these guys, but it's just, and they're all a little bit different. That's the thing about it. Like, you're not getting one, the same. Like, if you're facing the Rays in a 3-game, 4-game series, you're getting 4 different arm slots, different pitches. Like, are just all different. Like, what you get from, let's say, Shane, and then you get Springs, they're like opposites, right?
Even though they're 2 lefties, right? There's no familiarity coming from that left arm slot. And
exactly.
Man, Jeffrey Springs, my favorite player of 2022. This guy, I picked up on it early in the season. He started throwing this changeup more. And I remember I was watching a Rays broadcast, and they went to commercial break. They came back, and they just broke down some of the pitch sequencing from Jeffrey Springs from the previous half inning, and they showed, and we can take a look at his heat maps here. What he was doing was essentially creating this triangle of death. And he's not the only pitcher in baseball that employs this, but he's got this fastball that he can locate really well up in the zone, has some decent velocity with it, lost a little bit of velo transitioning to the starting rotation, but still plenty of velocity left to play up, especially if you can locate this pitch well. Then he has this changeup that he floats down and away from right-handers to help him neutralize that platoon split. And then he's got a slider that darts down towards the other corner of the strike zone. So you got 3 pitches coming in that look the same for about 50, 55 feet. You have a fastball that continues to rise or give that perception of rising towards the top of the zone, a changeup that'll flutter down and away one direction, or a slider that will go down and in a different direction. And this is you mentioned the Rays go and get guys that other teams don't use properly or they don't want anymore. And this was a great example where Springs comes over from the Red Sox, and the Red Sox had just thrown their arms up in the air, right? They always thought there was something there with Springs. They just couldn't get it out of him. Was it really as simple as just, hey, man, like you got a pretty good changeup. Let's just throw this changeup as your primary offering against right-handed batters. And what are we going to do against righties? We're going to hold him to a 227 batting average and a 302 slugging. I mean, this pitch, he threw this pitch over 40% of the time against righties last year.
I know, man.
Only gave up 3 home runs, 6 doubles, and a triple. That's insane.
Yeah, I know. It's crazy. Springs reminds me a lot of James Shields, back in the day when we had him. Change-up guy that just came in and was just, the Rays turned him into like a change-up machine, for like the better part of his career here. But Springs, man, like there's another guy last year that honestly, I didn't know what we were going to get from him. Same thing. Like, he was kind of put into action due to injuries and everything else that we were dealing with. And again, another pitcher that just came to do their job and, like you said, put us in a position to win. And we lost so many games last year just because we couldn't hit. Like, we just could not hit. But it will be games that or starting pitchers will just literally give us an opportunity to go and win every single time. It was rare for any of these pitchers to be like lit up in like 2 innings and we're down like 6 or 7-0. Like, it just doesn't happen. So, and then we signed, I know we're going to talk about the next guy that we just signed, which I talk a lot of smack about this guy last playoff run and just the whole season, Zach Eflin, right? I was never a fan, but the Rays probably see something that I don't, like usual, and for him to come in and especially now that we have Glasnow, sidelined, this is perfect. Goes right into the rotation. The probably what would you say, 3-4 spot, maybe, around there.
Yeah, and what I think the beauty is, regardless of where he slots in the rotation, right? Like I don't think Rasmussen and Springs have big egos as guys who are really just first-year starters last season.
Yeah.
If Eflin comes in and he's the 3 behind a healthy Glasnow, great. If you slot him 5th and you can get even because Eflin brings a lot of variety, right? Like you talked about the rest of the rotation having variety with Shane and Glasnow and Rasmussen and with Springs all having different looks. Eflin's another guy where you just don't get that from the rest of the rotation. Eflin's very like a ground ball artist, works with a less velocity. You can see 32nd percentile in fastball velocity last year. The spin rates are not crazy like you see from Rasmussen. So this is another different approach. And whether he's 3rd, 4th, or 5th in this rotation, there's got to be a lot to like here. And again, going back to the health conversation, this is another guy where outside of that 2019 season with Philly has struggled to stay healthy for 30 starts, to contend for awards. But you have Patino, you have Chirinos, you have guys coming out of the minor leagues that are probably going to be able to contribute. The Rays have long relief guys with Josh Fleming and potentially Jalen Beeks serving multiple innings out of the pen. Like, Eflin's a guy in my mind where there's 2 things that the Rays probably like from him. One, we can go look at the pitch mix here and we can see he's always thrown this sinker a ton, but this curveball, he started throwing this a little bit more last season. Finally, the Phillies with Dombrowski now have become more of a forward-thinking, analytically driven organization. So I think the Rays probably picked up on this a little bit. They see what Eflin's doing. They see that he's open to changing the way that he does things. The curveball was nasty last year. 155 batting average against it. A lot similar to Springs, not a lot of extra base hits. And then what ends up happening is if you can introduce like another pitch on top of that can help him against the platoon split, because Eflin has struggled a little bit with the lefty righty split throughout his career. But this is a guy, I think, from an analytical perspective, that the Rays probably were salivating at. And I think the commitment with the 3-year deal worth $40 million. We talk about the Rays not spending money. For the Rays to spend $40 million on anyone, they have to see a lot here that they really, really like.
Yeah.
And Eflin has always been a guy where it's like, if you just keep him healthy, he could be one of the better pitchers in the league.
I agree, man, and I think obviously, I other teams and other players, like I obviously watch but I don't dive as deep as anyone with the Rays. So like obviously with Eflin, when we signed them, I started doing research right away. Kind of what was that? Why? 3 years, 40 million, like you said, like we never spent. I'm like when I got the
like half your
notification on
payroll,
my
right?
phone, when I got a notification on my phone, I'm like, did I look at? And I opened. I'm like, we just gave this guy 3 years, $40 million. Like, this is not something that we do. So it's like I was shocked. I was like, this is crazy. But so I follow this guy honestly on Twitter. He's a Rays. I think I've sent you a couple of tweets of his. Everything's about everything Rays related at Rays stats. I can't really think of his name, but the dude is just breaking down pretty much to your point, similar things where you bring it up about the curveball and like, how the Rays can probably see him as adjusting a few couple of things and then making that next leap into being an elite pitcher, and that's obviously what they want and what they need. We didn't sign him to come here and not be part of something big. So he's probably, and now with the experience that he had in the playoff last year, that's another added dimension that I think really helps us as we make. I know September and October is going to be crazy in that AL East, So we need guys that have been in that stage, in that position to go to a Yankee Stadium, to go to Boston, Toronto now, in those hostile environments and take the ball and not be, the stage not be too big because he performed really well for the Phillies last year in that run. So I'm excited for that. But yeah, he's just another part of the rotation that I think it's just elite, man. I think our rotation is just probably top 5 in the league in the whole MLB. I'm sure there's this, top 10 for sure. I don't see 10 teams that have a better rotation if we're healthy, right? When you count Shane, Glasnow, Springs, Drew, Eflin 5, and then we have maybe 6, 7 long, in the bullpen ready to come in a bullpen day kind of thing.
Which you might need less of this year. And as good as that bullpen was last season, having a guy like Eflin who can go out there and Eflin didn't qualify last year. He didn't throw enough innings, but he had a 67.1% first strike rate. I mean, he's getting ahead of guys.
Wow.
Pretty much 7 out of 10 times. That would have ranked 4th best in baseball if he would have just thrown the requisite number of innings to qualify. So having a guy like that who, at least when he's healthy, can go out there and eat innings, that's something that I'm sure the Rays are looking at as well, understanding that they probably will have to limit McClanahan at certain points or potentially Glasnow and 100%. Even Springs and Rasmussen not being 200 inning type of guys. So I'm excited about this one. I'm excited for your evolution as a Zach Eflin hater to fan. And
I know, man. I'm really excited to watch him pitch, honestly, and just kind of really just see because we know, like every season, every pitcher adds a little bit of something, something that maybe they were been working on all off season. So I'm excited for to see what he's going to add with us. He's going to make him that much more efficient, better at what he does, and I have all the 100% trust in our pitching staff. I mean, that's why I'm like, anyone that we signed in the pitching staff, I'm like, it's okay. It's going to work out. Like, I'm somehow, somewhere, these guys are going to figure out what they do best, and they're going to put them in a good spot to succeed. So excited for that for sure.
Yeah. Well, talking about the bullpen then, because exactly what you just said is why I have to just assume as someone who bets on baseball, someone who watches baseball, that the Tampa Bay Rays are going to have an elite bullpen again this year, despite the fact that when you look at their depth chart, how many people have heard of these guys, right? I'll go down the list here. Peter Fairbanks, Jason Adam. That sounds like a creative player name in like 2026. It'll be the show. Like you got Colin
Jason
Pache.
Adam was one of the best pitchers, relief pitchers in baseball last year.
He was, but then you look at like Pache, you got Jalen Beeks, Garrett Clevenger. These are guys that the average baseball fan doesn't know. These are guys that even diehard baseball fans, the majority of them would probably be lying if they claim to be familiar with them. Out of this group, is there anyone in particular that you're really excited to watch in 2023, or someone that you think could emerge as an elite ninth inning? I know the Rays are more liberal with their bullpen usage, which, by the way, is another reason that I think you got to be high on the Rays, because it's been a proven fact for about 2 decades that if you have a default ninth inning guy, that you're not using him in the most advantageous positions on a consistent basis, which of course cost your team wins over the course of 162 games. But is there anybody in this bullpen where when they hand him the ball and he comes out to the mound in the 6th, 7th, 8th, or 9th inning, where you know that team's not scoring and your offense is going to come back and have a shot to put some more runs up with the score being the exact same?
Yeah, man. So obviously, there's a couple of things. So if you follow the race closely and you listen to Kevin Cash, like he's very open about that a game can be won or lost in the 7th inning. You know, that could be a spot where you have to bring in your closer to put a fire away, right, and get through that to that 8th and 9th, right? So like, obviously, if I had to say who our closer is today, it's probably Peter Fairbanks. I mean, the dude is absolutely insane. Like what you need to be a closer. Like he's just like, he doesn't even look like he's right when he's out there. He's just so amped up. You know, I mean, throws a filthy I mean, it's just fastball. Like let's just bring it out. He's just gonna come out. He's gonna throw fastball after fastball, and it's either you're gonna hit it or you're gonna strike out. I mean,
and why would he throw anything else, right? This was like, if we go back to his pitch
there
mix
you go.
again, this is another guy, right? Why was he throwing his slider 56% of the time in 2019? The fastball is his best offering by far, and when you use it as your primary offering, then it makes the slider play a little bit better.
Yep.
The velocity's 96th percentile. The spin rate is elite. Opposing hitters betted 118 against the pitch. So yeah, he came in, he threw the ball hard, he threw the ball hard again, he threw the ball hard again, and then he got out of the inning.
Yeah, pretty much. That's what he does. He comes in and he's going to like look like he's on something, but he's going to throw, 20 pitches, and 20 is going to be 18 fastballs, maybe 2 sliders. But again, this is what I was talking about when the Rays targeting a specific kind of pitcher for their bullpen. It's fastball, slider. If you got those 2 pitchers, right, those 2 pitches, you're probably going to get traded for. Like, the Rays are probably going to bring you in and they're going to try to work with you somehow. There was a story back in 2021. I don't know. Most people will know this guy. His name is Lewis Head. He was a pitcher. I think he's with the Marlins now, or in someone's bullpen, but he's not with the Rays no more. So he was discussing how when the Rays traded for him, and in the second or third, bullpen session that they watched him, they essentially told him that they wanted to go. They wanted him to go more horizontal with his slider, right? So he said it was different because a lot of times with all the organizations that he was coming from, they wanted him to go more so and up and down to essentially match the fastball, right? To go from the top of the zone all the way down. Now they come to the Rays and they're telling him, hey, no, with the arm slot, you need to, get more sweep in the slider if you go horizontal, right? Guess what happens? He threw 63 pitches with the Rays for like 2 years, 2.26 ERA, right? The same thing, like most pitchers come in, a lot of people in the bullpen, especially relief pitchers that might be struggling on the teams. But if you got those 2 pitches, man, but I'm excited. Jalen Beeks, I think Jalen Beeks is going to have a big year from the Rays. He's a lefty. He was former starter. He used to be a starter, struggled a lot in Boston. The Rays traded him for. Last year was the first season, I think, that he was really established just more so as a bullpen guy. And I think he did well to make that transition, from being a starter to now, being as part of a bullpen. So I think from that perspective, I mean, look at his. I think to me, we don't have a lot of like lefty options either. We only have 2 or 3. So we need guys like Jalen Beeks to have a big year, and to continue to build on what they were doing, especially from last season. I think last season he performed well for the most part, but I think this year will be a next step for him to maybe get into those later innings, 8th inning setup kind of guy, and so forth. But
Well, and
But yeah,
Jalen
man,
Beeks,
we have
real
a
quick, real
yeah
quick with Jalen Beeks too. It was interesting to see how well he performed last year. One, he came back with more velocity than he had
yeah
pre Tommy John surgery, but he lost pretty much all of 2020 and then all of 2021 because he
yeah.
was hurt and then recovering from
Mhm.
being hurt. And typically, when a guy has Tommy John, the hardest part to get back from is the command, like regaining the feel of the
Yeah,
baseball, learning how to throw the baseball with good accuracy and precision again. Last year, it wasn't particularly problematic for him. The walk rate was certainly higher than we'd seen in the past, 8.8%. But the velo good, the K percentage good, the run prevention, sub 3 ERA, the peripherals suggested maybe he was a little bit lucky,
yep,
but still overall a really good season. And now this year, having a full off season to be 100% healthy, having a full year of experience coming out of the bullpen. I know it says he started 7 games here, but he was an opener as well. That's just an oddity as being part of that Raves bullpen. But man, you mentioned it, a unique offering from the left side out of the bullpen. It's the Rays have so many guys that would probably flounder elsewhere, but the Rays know how to utilize them. They know how to nurture them. Kevin Cash knows when to go to certain guys and which matchups. It's
yeah,
really
man. I
cool to
think so
watch
too.
somebody
It
is a fan of
it
baseball.
is it is it is. And one guy that I think they're pretty high on, that I've been hearing a lot, just part of spring training and listening to Kevin Cash and the pitching staff. Kevin Kelly, I believe this is the guy that they got through like the Rule 5 draft in
Mhm.
December,
Correct.
um, which a little bit of a different delivery because I think if correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure he sidearmed, which we don't have a lot of that. We don't have a lot of sidearm pitchers in the staff at all. Um, but the Rays seem to be really high on him, so I think he's probably be another pitcher that he's young, 25 years old. The Rays obviously got him in that Rule 5 draft for a reason. I don't think they're just going to do it just for him not to have a big season with us, would be an integral part of our bullpen this
Mhm.
season. So that's a guy to keep an eye out for, especially. I think he's probably going to start on the coming off in the 6th, 7th inning, maybe working his way up to have more high leverage situations as the season goes. But yeah, someone that I think the Rays are pretty big on is this guy for sure.
Yeah, and hasn't thrown a ton of innings, but the innings that he has thrown have been relatively effective. The ERA in the FIP last year in AAA with Cleveland, pretty solid. The year before in AA before he got called up in 2022, same thing. Pretty
Hmm.
unhittable. The K percentage, elite, north of 30%. Pretty
Yep.
pretty palatable walk percentage for a guy that's going to be coming out of the bullpen. You can tolerate around 8%. He got roughed up in his first spring training appearance the other day, but again, it's spring training, as you mentioned. Guys are going out there and sometimes they're being asked to do very specific things that are outside of their
Correct.
comfort zone. So people look at that and they think, oh, there's no way he's going to make the major league roster after that embarrassing performance. But that might have
No.
been organizationally driven of like, hey, can you go out there and just try to do this thing? Push yourself a little bit. Let's see what happens.
Or like, hey, work on this pitch. We want to see that what
Yep.
it looks like in live action against
Yep.
a different hitters and stuff. So like, obviously there is some to spring training. I do believe in like that momentum, especially for hitters as you go. And if you're having a
Uh-huh.
good spring, that can easily translate into the start of the season. But for pitchers, I think, and it's just so many moving pieces too with the spring training, with the pitch clock now and everything else, and the pitchers getting adjusted to having that big old clock counting down, and the batters can't step out, and so it's a little bit different. So I think this spring training, I think it's going to lead to more outings like that, and that's okay. That's what spring training is for.
I'll never forget because in Cleveland, Cliff Lee was one of our pitchers who came through and was sensational. And he had one season in 2008 where he went 22-3, had a 2.54 ERA, but he was obliterated in spring training. I remember the local media freaking out and thinking, oh, this guy's not going to be very good. And they had talked to him at some point in May or June or July, and he's like, yeah, I literally just needed to figure out how to locate my fastball. So I went out there and threw nothing but fastballs in spring training. I wasn't really surprised that I got tattooed. I was only throwing one pitch, and then went out
That's
and
what I'm
won a Cy
saying,
Young.
man. That's what I mean, like, but a lot of people would see that and they're like, oh man, like this is, it's
Mhm.
gonna be rough for this guy or this particular person. But in reality, it's just like you said, it might just be coaching telling you, hey, we need you to work on this, we need you to work on that, and
Mhm.
so forth. So like I don't take a lot of stock when it comes to spring training. Other than especially, I'll keep an eye on hitters mostly as the season gets closer to see who's hot, who's trending in the right direction, kind of ready
Mhm.
to roll. But pitching wise, most pitchers will get it together by the start of the season.
Yeah. So last guy, just I want to mention before we move over to the hitters on this team
Hmm.
is the guy who you mentioned maybe 10 minutes ago, Jason Adam, because there's few guys in Major League Baseball when you pull up their savant chart that bleeds more red than this guy. The velocity is elite,
Yeah,
limits hard contact better than almost any pitcher in baseball. The expected stats are 99th percentile batting average, 99th percentile slugging. K percentage is great. The walk percentage is better than league average. Pretty much everything you would want out of a pitcher, this guy did last season. And just to finish off our conversation on Rays pitching, what did he do last year? He went from using his fastball 57% of the time to 32% of the
hmm,
time. He elevated his changeup and his slider, two pitches that were better offerings for him. And the really interesting thing when stuff like this happens is I always refer to it as a Goldilocks zone of like there's a specific optimal usage for each pitch to get the most out of each pitcher.
yes,
His fastball went from having an opponent batting average of 296 and a opponent slugging of 556 to a 211 batting average and a 298 slug. And it's because he used it far less and because he mixed it in along his pitches that were much better. The slider and the changeup, which you had to take seriously because these two pitches were damn near unhittable. So he went
yeah,
and all of a sudden had three pitches that have a whiff percentage north of 30, three pitches that he can get a guy out with on a consistent basis, either via weak contact or via a swing and miss. And it's really
yeah,
sometimes this simple. I think a lot of people, they look at their favorite team before the season and think, oh, if we do these 18 complex things, maybe we have a shot. And then you have a team like the
correct.
Rays or some of these other more analytically driven organizations who are like, let's just throw your best pitch more and let's see if you get significantly better. And a lot of times that's what happens.
Yeah, man, and I think it's just a matter of, again, it's they adjust to pitcher strength, right? Like
Mhm.
if this is what we feel like, what we know is that you're trending in this direction, why not do it more? Like it's okay for you to do it more. You don't have to just because like this is not the 1900s anymore. Like this is driven by Rays are one of the teams that they're driven by this stuff, analytics and data and
Mhm.
everything. That's what they rely on. Sometimes to a fault, you know, but yeah, man, Jason Adams, another guy that I think can he replicate last season and be that unhittable? I don't know, but I think he's still going to be a solid piece of the bullpen. I think he started to get tired as well towards the end of the season. He started to have a little more rough outings, but he pitched a lot last season as well. So his innings were pretty up there with relievers. So I think that's another guy that we'll probably see him being managed a little bit differently this season to hopefully get him, as healthy as possible for that run
Mhm.
in September. So
Yeah. And again, having better starting pitching and hopefully healthy starting pitching after Glasnow comes back, hopefully avoids these bullpen days or having a short outing and then having to go to the bullpen 2 or 3 days in a row because of rough outings from other starters. So the fact that every guy in the starting rotation should be out there, be able to go out there every single day
hmm,
and give you 5 innings of 2-ish run baseball, if not more, and then hand it over to a pen should alleviate some of those workload concerns, should make everybody a lot better as a result.
yeah, man, I'm just excited for it to start. I really want to see where these guys fall in and because like I said, every season is so different, and like just seeing like the dynamics of it and just kind of like watching these guys just how because every season in the bullpen specifically, every guy kind of falls into their own little, you know,
Mhm.
that this is what I do really well. Like, I'm gonna get out of, if you got a guy that if you have people on base, he's gonna come in and hopefully get you out of it. Guys like Fairbanks, late inning, ninth inning type of guy. And then you'll have someone like this 25-year-old that we just added the side armor. What is that going to look like? How is Kevin Cash going to utilize him?
Mhm.
So I'm excited, but you never know with Kevin Cash. So that's the thing.
I mean, that's half the fun watching the Rays, I'm sure. It's just figuring out what Kevin
It
Cash
is.
is going to do with the puzzle pieces. One guy, though,
Yeah.
well, looking at the hitters that is for sure a huge puzzle piece for the Rays this season and going forward. Wander Franco, he missed a lot of time last year with different injuries, and fortunately, I think not injuries that have any sort of seismic bearing on his long-term outlook. When you look at what those injuries were, he had the quad injury, he had the hamstring injury, he had the hamate bone injury late in the season, which ended up costing him a good chunk of time. But after he came back, he hit 322, had some good pop, 10 extra base hits in his last 25 contests. This is a guy that they locked up in pre-arb, a long-term extension pre-arb, like you mentioned earlier, which is sort of a Rays philosophy. Some people are down on him. I feel like Franco is now in this post-hype phase because he didn't play a lot last year, because he's in a smaller market. You don't look convinced, though. You seem to have some pretty high hopes for this guy in 2023.
100%, man. 2020 guy. I mean, it's 20 home run, 20 stolen bases easily. It's there for him to do. Like that's, and what's today, March 5th? Just if there's a bet for that, the 2020 bet, just do it. It's easy money. Like, I mean, absolute stud, man. I mean, the dude, honestly, if he plays, let's say 140 games, that number is gonna be destroyed. Like, he's elite. I mean, his eyes are just out of this world. Like the way that he can just the strike zone command, the way that he's able to kind of feel for like what he needs in a specific situation. Like he's not a guy that's looking out there to hit a home run every single time. Like he understands that if he needs just to get a single to drive a run in, that's what he'll do. That will be his approach for that particular at bat. Obviously, there's times where he's, and I think what I'm most excited about is just the fact that he had that disappointing season. He's had that, all those games taken away because of injury and all that. So he's coming into the season, and this spring, I think he's hitting 500 or something like that. I mean, the dude is. I mean, I've been watching his off-season workouts. I've been watching some of the stuff that he's been up to. Just full-blown commitment to being great. So the dude obviously is really young. Obviously there's gonna be times where like this. The only thing that worries me about him is just the health, obviously, because last year was just so many different things, man. Like it just kept coming up, the hamstring, the hand, this or that. And it was just like, man, you're so young. Like, what's going on? But at the same time, I think it was just one of those years that it just happens, He's been doing this since he was like 14 years old. So it's not like he's just getting into the professional limelight, right? The dude's 16 playing adults, Come on. So I have
he's better than a lot of the adults.
And this is the reason why I'm so high on the Rays offense. It's like we didn't have Wander Franco last year. You know what I mean? Like he wasn't a big part of it just because he only played, I think, 70 games, right? Probably I
83 games he played.
83.
Games. Yeah.
So 83 games.
And that was also cut up at different points in the year, right? It's not like you had him for 83 for the first half or 83 for the second half. He was there, then he wasn't. He was there, then he wasn't. He was there, then he wasn't.
So there was never a time for him to really get into that groove, to like really find a rhythm of like the season. But I think this year, 290 to 300 batting average easily. I mean, he doesn't strike out a ton. He has a great
9.6% K rate. I mean, this guy was a 99th percentile in strikeout rate last year. And if we go and we look at how did he do this, Z contact percentage, so in the zone contact percentage, you can see he didn't qualify last year because of all the missed time. So he wasn't a qualified hitter, but 344 plate appearances. The only guys that made more contact in the zone with him that had more plate appearances than him, Steven Kwan, similar archetype of a player, but without the upside that Franco has. Then you're looking at a guy like Kiner Falefa, he can make contact with the ball but doesn't do any damage with the baseball. The Nick Madrigal, same thing, where like can make contact, can't do much damage with it. The Luis Arraez of the world, like so. For a guy who can make as much contact as Wander Franco, the ability for him to make contact in the zone, and then we can look at outside the zone contact percentage as well, almost 80%, which was irrespective of how many plate appearances guys had last year, was top 16 in baseball. The approach is so mature for a guy that, as you mentioned, is only 22 years old. There's still the potential that he can improve with his chase rate. There was a really interesting piece the other day by Mark Tompkin, one of the Rays beat reporters, of the organizational emphasis on swing decisions this year. Last year, they came into the season and they were focusing a lot on mechanics. They were focusing on launch angle. They were focusing on things that maybe were outside of the comfort zone of some of these hitters, which, as you mentioned with the pitchers, they don't try to force pitchers to do anything that they're not comfortable doing. They cater to their strengths, which is why they go acquire the guy that already has a fastball and a slider, and they can innovate around the edges there. With the hitters last year, it seemed like they tried to force those guys to be power hitters or to do things that maybe were irresponsible to ask of them. This year, they just want you to make contact. They want you to swing at good pitches. They want you to lay off of bad pitches. A guy like Wander Franco, he is 40-1 to win the American League MVP right now at FanDuel, as low as 22-1 at Caesars. And Caesars is usually a pretty sharp book. If Caesars is undercutting a line like that, Caesars is telling you go bet that somewhere else. They don't want to take your money and have that liability on that prop. Franco is a really dangerous guy. The sprint speed is there. He's also an elite base runner, which is something that I think gets overlooked from a betting perspective, from a fan perspective. This is a guy that goes first to third, second to home, better than a lot of guys in baseball.
And this year, with the whole different with the shift with him, even before this, you could not play a shift against Wander Franco. Like,
look at the spray chart here. They're all over.
You couldn't you could not so the shift is not really going to affect them regardless if it was there. It was not. He's still going to be an elite hitter. But what's really going into what I'm really excited is just overall with the Rays team is just the ability to steal base. I think that's going to be a big part of what we do this year, because now the rules are help. Essentially they're helping the base runners, right? You can only throw to the first twice, in a bat, or you have to clock, going against the pitcher. And I know it's a little bit longer with people on base, but still, I'm thinking the Rays, that's why I'm so high on Franco, because a 2020 season, it's right there for him. It's the 20 stolen bases as long as he's healthy. He has the speed to do that. He's super smart. He knows when to take off, when not to do it. And the power, I think the power is just will come with him playing games, and getting the feel and just being in the lineup over and over again. So I was really pumped that I saw him hit a right-handed home run on spring training the other day. I was like, all right, so he has some pop from the right-hand side, That's the what people say all the time. It's like, oh, he can only hit from the left side. He doesn't have as much pop from the right, but I think he does.
Yeah, it's exciting for him. I do think I'm going to take a small investment on him at 40-1 to win the American League MVP. It's
smart.
It's that organizational approach, man. And again, it's the base running. It's the little things. Like you look at down the roster last season, we had, and I can share this screen as well, just some of the data that I pulled from Baseball Prospectus with the base running here with the Tampa Bay Rays. Christian Betancourt is a catcher. You don't expect him to run the base as well, but then you have Yandy Diaz, Isaac Paredes, Wander Franco, Jose Siri, Manuel Margot, Taylor Walls. All of these guys are elite base runners. It's a really, really cool thing if you're the Tampa Bay Rays and you have the new rules this season, that you're going to be able to unleash these guys on the bases, whether they have elite speed or not. Stealing bases is a lot more about having a high baseball IQ than anything else. So really, really excited to watch this team in that regard this year. I think we just did lose B-Flo. Might be some internet issues. We'll see if we can get him back here, but we can just move through the rest of this lineup really quick. We just mentioned Betancourt. It's another guy at the plate. He had a long hiatus from Major League Baseball. He was gone for a few seasons, came back. He showed a little bit of pop last year, but the main thing with him that I think we're going to need to see some improvement going into 2023 if he's going to be part of a resurgent Rays team. Is the walk rate, and we do have B-Flo back. Lost him for a second with the internet, but no worries. I was just transitioning into the rest of this lineup here with Christian Betancourt. He was a guy that was out of the league for a while, came back, and I mean, man, it's just another one of these guys that the Rays find that somehow the rest of the league couldn't find, and especially defensively, pretty respectable framer behind the plate, but the pop time, 96th percentile, going into a season where teams are going to try to be aggressive. They're going to try to win more games, going from first to second, from second to third, being hyper aggressive, especially when they know the pitcher can't throw over anymore. It's got to feel good to have a guy that can more than likely neutralize the running game.
Former pitcher, right? So, the dude
Understands it from both sides.
The dude has a cannon, man. I mean, I think they put him out there like last season when we're getting blown out in the mountain. The dude just threw an easy 96. I'm like, come on, bro. Like it's just like there's some things that you're just like, okay, like sure. No, but I'm excited. Definitely I think it's an up. No, I wouldn't say an upgrade defensively over Sunino, right? Because Sunino was, or handle or pitching staff amazingly, right? So a lot of times people were like, why do we keep playing Sunino out there? I'm like, listen, man, he's getting this guy strikes, like over and over again, and that's what we want, right? Like we want someone that can do that. So, but Betancourt now, I think offensively has a higher upside. Again, that another reason why I'm high. I'm just high in our offense this year. I think we can definitely improve on our. I think we scored less than 700 runs. I don't see why we shouldn't score. 800 this season. We have the potential to do that.
You scored 857 the year before that, and then 666 in 2022. So even if you don't think you're getting all the way back to 857, there's got to be a middle ground there that's more attainable with the healthy Franco, with some of these other pieces that are going to come up.
I mean, Betancourt is going to be a guy that hopefully will provide some pop, but other than that, bro, we'll manage our pitching staff really well. We'll limit the running, which will be incredibly important this season, right? More than ever. With all the rule changes. So with that, I think he's going to be a big part of that. But then you got guys, like Brandon Lowe, right? That's going to be, I think, a huge bounce back year for him. Like a potential 30 home run guy that last year could not stay healthy at all. But if he does stay healthy, I mean, I would say, top 10 second baseman in the league. I mean, he has the potential to do that. Obviously, always going to be, he's always going to strike out a ton. But man, when he hits he's not a big guy. He's like 5. Yeah, he's a 5'10". But when he gets a hold of those baseballs, man, like they're gone. Like they're not just like just barely over the fence. They're like just out. So like. Another guy that I'm expecting him to bounce back. If he can give us 100, 30, 150 games, that's a huge thing. Just having him in the lineup, it just provides that presence. So I think he bounces back.
And on the note with Brandon Lowe, he's another one of these guys with the Rays that. If you play fantasy, if you play DFS, if you're just a casual baseball fan, it seemed like he came out of nowhere. But before the 39 homer year, you can see at 14 home runs, 7 home runs, 6 home runs, and then last year had 8 home runs. So I think a lot of people sit here and they think, oh, well, that 2021 just had to be a fluke because of that. But when you look at what Brandon Lowe has done throughout the course of his career, he's always had this high upside. And again, in 2021, this 88th percentile barrel percentage is an indication of something that had been there for multiple years. The year before that, 98th percentile in barrel rate. And for people who are unfamiliar with barrel rate, that is essentially the most optimal positioning to hit a baseball when you think about a round ball coming in at a downward angle and a launch angle that's within a very narrowly defined parameter. That's where you're mentioning these balls that are seemingly going 40, 50 rows up into the right field bleachers. Brandon Lowe can do that because of what he brings to the table. And And last year, I know he played, I believe we could pull it back up here, 65 games.
Yeah.
The back issue was there seemingly right from the beginning, which was, I think,
Yeah.
all the more impressive that in 65 games, he still had the 8 home runs. He actually made some improvements at the plate from a contact perspective. There's really nothing to suggest that this guy can't come back and hit 30 home runs this year. He doesn't need to hit 40, right? As a second baseman,
No.
you're at the Keystone, you're lucky to get any offensive production. Brandon Lowe doing anything remarkable at the plate relative to the opponent, who probably has a Nick Madrigal type of guy or a guy who's hitting 250 or 275 with minimal extra base potential. Brandon Lowe is a huge advantage for the Tampa Bay Rays.
Yeah, man. I mean, I'm honestly, 25 home runs. I'm happy with that. I mean, the guy, we just need. I mean, we just need consistency, right? If he can stay healthy and if he can be there, day in and day out for a lineup, I mean, he provides such a big boost. I mean, he's a presence. Pitchers have to know when he's coming up, like, because if you're not sharp, and he loves swinging first pitch. If you go out there throw a meatball down the middle in the first pitch, goodbye. You know,
Yep.
it's gonna if he can get a hold of it, he's gonna be there. But again, this is people are like, oh no, it's always gonna be the same thing with the Rays, no offense. I'm like, I don't know. I think a lot of guys are just we're forgetting that we have guys that have the potential to really be really good offensively, right? Like Wander Franco, if he has a bounce back here, right? Obviously, disappointing season overall, right? For him, and if you ask him, he probably tell you it was disappointing season. Brandon Lowe, disappointing season. Randy Arozarena, to me, right, 20 home runs. I have a love-hate relationship with Randy, you know, because he's just like, I don't know, man. He's
Let's
wild. He's
talk
a
about
wild
him.
card.
Let's talk about him because I feel the same way. He really made his namesake in the postseason, hitting all those home runs during the COVID campaign, and he's one of the few guys that I think the majority of baseball fans recognize his name when the Tampa Bay Rays roll out their lineup card.
Yeah.
And he's done some things that put him in rarefied air. Last year, he joined Trey Turner and Jose Ramirez as one of only 3 guys in Major League Baseball with back-to-back 20 homer, 20 steal seasons. And Arozarena was actually the only guy last year to have 20 homers and 30 steals out of that trio. So he does some things really, really well. The defense leaves a lot to be desired. And I mean a lot to be desired. Not a great base runner as well. And then he also regressed a little bit. If we go and we pull up his savant chart here, some of the things that portend in like an outbreak or like a breakout year, he did not have last season. So typically you like to see guys making strides in zone contact rates, which is a lot of what modern scouting places a lot of emphasis on. The fact that he's still 36th percentile in chase rate shows me that he's still undisciplined, even though he's getting to the point where he's almost 30 years old. Whiff percentage, he's still swinging through a lot of pitches, which maybe this was what we were reading about in Tompkins' article the other day, where the organization was placing too much emphasis on launch angle, too much emphasis on trying to hit the baseball out of the park on a consistent basis. And maybe with a little bit more organizational emphasis on good swing decisions, we see Arozarena get back to the 68th percentile in chase rate, which we saw in 2021. It's clearly there. Just we didn't see it for an entire season, which is obviously a concern.
Yeah, man. And that's another thing. So, like, when I say I have a love-hate relationship with Randy, it's because he can take over a game, you know, any given game, right? He can just have 2 home runs, 6 RBIs, you know, 2 stolen bases, and you know, just dynamic, right? But then you have a stretch where he's just, like you said, just swinging at anything and everything that's thrown on his site. It can be up, low, away, in the dirt. He's just going to swing, and there's certain times where you just need, like you said, he's getting to that age where like maybe this is just who he is. Maybe this is just who he's gonna be. He's always gonna be. He reminds me a lot of like Yasiel Puig when he came out. You know, a lot of flair, a lot of like flavor. Or like, I mean, horrible base runner. I mean, you know how many times I
The
just wanted
worst.
to go through my TV yet last season and just like bench him. I mean, I would scream at Kevin Cash just to bench him because it was just so outrageous, some of the stuff that he does.
And a team like Tampa Bay as well, when you're operating with limited financial capital, when you have a very razor thin margin for error, that's one thing that the rest of the roster did really well. And I mentioned it when we lost you for a minute ago, was the base running metrics, and Baseball Savant has some pretty good ones looking at guys' impact on the bases, and this factors in everything like going first to third, second to home, which we talked about. The rest of this roster is very, very good. The only guy that you really have a huge issue with that played the majority of the season last year, Christian Betancourt, and he's a catcher. So
Yeah,
relative to other catchers in the league, Tampa Bay can deal with this, and it still wasn't atrocious. Brandon Lowe dealing with the back issues definitely played a role there, but every single other member of this roster that projects to be a fixture in the lineup on an everyday basis or a near everyday basis, very, very good, except for Randy Arozarena, and he wasn't just unimpressive. He was the furthest thing from impressive. Negative 2.6 in this metric is very hard to achieve. The fact that
I
he was able
mean,
to do that says a lot about how
awful.
consistently terrible he
Awful.
was on the base
I
path.
mean, awful. I mean, running into outs. I mean, uh, I mean, some of the when he tried to steal base, some of the leads were just awful. Some of the reads were just
Yep.
bad. I mean, it was just, and it just never seemed for him to like. You would think that after like, let's say after the All-Star break, you know what, I gotta like lay out, gotta chill out. No, he just did it even more, and it was just like there were times where I just be like, oh my god, like we just we're promising inning, and then Arozarena decides to just get in a pickle. Like why? Like why you want to like what is going on? Like try to steal home. It's just like what are you doing? Like what are you doing? It's like,
It's like he's getting
but
bored playing a video game sometimes, and he's
yeah,
just why not?
and
Why not?
and you mentioned defensively, obviously not. There's not a lot there. He's just kind of he can be when he tries, when he wants to be. He can get, he can be decent, and be serviceable as a defender. But that's just, I feel like he's one of these guys that is kind of like if he feels like it.
Mhm.
It depends how he wakes up in that day. Like, does he want to play defense today or not? Or is it like, does he want to like run the bases today and go and attempt 3 steals and get none? Maybe, or he might just so like, but I think hopefully as he progresses and this year from everything that I've been reading, he's been supposedly diving a lot into like data as well, like analytics and everything to like kind of help him with this part of his game. So I'm hoping that maybe there is a little bit of and like I said, I think we all know who he is and what he's gonna be. But if he can just maybe, shore up a little bit, be more disciplined in certain aspects of his game, he's gonna have a spot in our lineup. I mean, we need him regardless, right?
Mhm.
So,
And as much as it
but yeah,
irritates you, he's an above average hitter, and the defense when he wants it to be is good. 2021, he was 75th percentile and outs above average. Last year
correct.
regressed sharply on the metric, and that's even more frustrating in a way because it
Yes,
is an effort stat. You know that he does have the
it
physical
is.
tools and the gifts to do that. One guy in this lineup though that you probably don't have to worry about at all from a consistency perspective is Yandy Diaz. Second time in 3 years last year that he walked more than he struck out. He somehow had 40 extra base hits despite the fact that he had single digit home runs on the season. Not the best defender in the world, not the worst defender in the world. Has biceps that make you think he'll hit 50 dingers a year, but
It's
as a
not his
Rays
game.
fan, what are your thoughts on this guy? He's obviously not going to win an MVP, but he's pretty versatile. You can play him at first, you can play him at third, you can put him seemingly anywhere in the order. As someone who watches the Rays nearly every single day, what are your thoughts on him?
I love him. I love Yandy, but he's actually gonna. I think he's probably transitioning more to first this year. I'm expecting him to probably play more than half of his games at first, probably even more. I don't think you'll see him a lot at third base. I think that's going to be more so Paredes at third, or we'll talk about Curtis coming up, maybe Curtis there, but I think Yandy is definitely going to be more so taking over that G-man spot at first, which he plays okay at first. I don't have a problem with him, but I mean, when you talk about consistency, this is the guy. I mean, the dude just has such a good understanding of his strike zone, of like the where he needs, like situational hitting is just amazing, man. Like like if you need just contact, this is the guy you want up there because he's gonna make contact. If you need a fly ball, right? To just bring a run in, he'll get you that. If you need a grounder to the other side to move the runner to third, he'll give you that. So his understanding of just the overall strike zone is elite, and he's proven that over and over again now over multiple seasons. So I was happy that the Rays signed him and gave him the money. I think he earned his money. I think he's right where he deserves to be. But then again, I would love to see a little bit more power, but I don't think I don't think that's his game, and I don't think that's something that he necessarily like feels that he needs to add to become better. I think he knows what he does really well, and he's okay with it. And I think the Rays are okay with it. So
I mean, we saw it in Cleveland. Like Cleveland tried to bust him out of this flat launch angle first because the big jokes, like when he first got with the team, it was all about the biceps. He truly looks like I mean, a lot of people probably aren't familiar with Albert Bell, but like Albert Bell was, juice. I mean, the muscles like you see on only a 1 percentile of human beings, and that dude was hitting balls off the scoreboard. And then you get Diaz playing in a Cleveland uniform, and that's probably the closest that we've seen image-wise, physically, to a guy like Albert Bell, and then he hits 50% of his balls on the ground. He makes a lot of hard contact. We can see the Savant chart. You're pleased with this. Not like the exit velocity is great. The expected stats are great. The only thing here that isn't great is the barrel percentage. And what you can deduce from this is if he's hitting the baseball hard, but the base and there's a lot of contact here with very low K percentage.
Yeah.
The third component of barrel percentage is the launch angle. And Yandy has just shown a repeated lack of interest or lack of ability to increase that launch angle while still remaining a good hitter. So I'm with you. He seems to be another guy. Last year, and we've brought this up a few times, where maybe the organization was pushing too much on the launch angle as an organization. And now a guy like Diaz, who can maybe just come to work every day and just be comfortable, and he knows he's not going to be bugged about launch angle or bugged about hitting more fly balls in an era of baseball that we might be transitioning into, where there's going to be more small ball. There's going to be a lot more emphasis on situational hitting, situational moving guys over with less than 2 outs, getting the guy home from third with 1 out, stuff like that. There's 29 other teams in baseball that I think could use a Yandy Diaz going into 2023.
I mean, like you said, any team can use a Yandy Diaz. I mean, the dude is just, I mean, he walks, I mean, he's takes the highest percentage of pitches, probably up there in the top leader in the league, right? Pitches per plate appearances, probably up there. Walks, I mean, so like, yeah, it's just one of those things that, and like I said, the most impressive thing is like, this is not just, oh, he did it last year. No, he's been doing this. He has been doing this consistently. And I think, again, going to be, another integral part. He's getting up there. I mean, 31. I'm saying he's getting up there in age, and I'm 30. And like, he's only 31. And, but no,
you guys are in a slightly different line of work. I don't think 31 is over the hill in your profession.
No. But I'm saying, but I think overall he's for the most part stay healthy. He's dealt with a couple of things here and there. But I think he knows how to take care of his body, and I know the one thing with Yandy Diaz is I know that I can count on him to be there most of the time, and especially when it comes down to playoff games and big games. He's going to be there, So I love Yandy Diaz, one of my favorite Rays. So again, expecting him to do the same thing. Not expecting him to change anything. Not expecting him to hit 30 home runs because he's never been that guy. But he'll get you a ton of doubles, ton of walks, ton of singles. Keep the lineup moving, keep that momentum. Mm-hmm. He's never going to be like Red is going to be like an inning killer, and just kind of like not move it along. So.
Well, let's talk about the guy that's probably going to be opposite him on the diamond. Isaac Paredes came over from Detroit in exchange for Austin Meadows. You just mentioned that Yandy is a good bet to continue doing what he's been doing and having a positive impact on the Rays. Paredes is a guy that when he was part of that Austin Meadows deal, that deal was the Austin Meadows deal. It wasn't the Paredes deal.
Yeah.
He's got some pressure on him down the organization with guys like Curtis Mead coming up. But it's hard to push out a guy like Paredes who was just so damn productive last season.
Yeah.
Where do you think he fits into the organization's plans? And a guy like Curtis Mead coming up, hitting the ball well in spring training so far, does he have rookie of the year value? Like, I mean, just give me your thoughts on third base and this Mead Paredes situation in general.
So I think the first thing is I think Paredes is going to get all the chance in the world to get that job and take over that job. You know, I don't think there's anyone that's going to. Taylor Walls is not going to make a push for that. I mean, Taylor Walls is awful.
The fact that he almost had 500 plate appearances last year is another example of how down bad Tampa Bay was health wise. Because
I mean,
that guy's terrible at hitting baseballs. He's a utility guy. You throw him out there late in the game, like as a defensive replacement. But my God, the less that you can have the bat in a guy like his hands, the better you're going to be.
Yeah, so I think Paredes is going to be one of those guys that I think the Rays will give him as much opportunity as possible to establish himself as, you know, we traded for. I mean, when we made that trade, I'll be honest, I was like, oh man, Austin Meadows has been kind of a key part of our lineup since that trade happened, and I was kind of like, a little disappointed, but at the same time, again, one of those trades that the Rays make, and somehow, some way, you know, Austin Meadows, I think, played like 10 games with the Tigers or something, you know, like they didn't even do anything with them. So Paredes, though, the situation with Curtis Mead. So Curtis Mead, I'm really excited about Curtis Mead. I mean, the dude can just hit flat out bombs. I mean, he's just one of those guys that he's a DH kind of guy, right? He's going to come in, like automatically you can plug him into, you know, your DH spot, and he's going to add, you know, something to that position. In terms of fielding, probably Paredes has the advantage in there, you know, much better defender. And, you know, the Rays love, you know, defense and run prevention. So he's going to have the leg up on that. Coming off a season where he hit 20 home runs in the major leagues against big-time pitchers. So there's no reason why the Rays should feel the rush to bring up Curtis Mead, you know, to take over and cut into Paredes' time, right? So, and I think with Curtis Mead, you know, as we transition to that, I think the Rays will be what they do with every prospect is essentially they'll probably start out with AAA, you know, and then bring him on probably either throughout the season in case of any injuries, but definitely more towards the end of the season. You know, that's where I'm expecting a lot of Curtis Mead, you know, after the All-Star break when roster expansions and all that. But yeah, Paredes, I'm high on Paredes. I mean, if he can replicate a 20 home run season and just get a little bit better in terms of just better situational hitting, you know, taking more walks. And I'm glad that you brought up the article because I read the same article about the hitting approach being different this season. And I think that's going to help a lot of our hitters. Just kind of like you said, take a step back and like just be themselves, right? And like I'm excited to get back into the brand of Rays baseball that I'm used to is like working the count, taking the bases, right? You know, not just trying to hit home runs
early in a series and then getting at bats against lesser arms, stuff like that.
Exactly, you know. So like, you know, a lot of times I feel like last year we were just trying to. I mean, we had to try to keep up with the Yankees home runs wise, the Blue Jays, and all that, and we still do. But I think that will come more organically this season, as players just kind of feel better within their set, you know, position. But yeah, Paredes. So Paredes considered a rookie, right, this year, as he goes in, or no?
Paredes, I believe, shed his designation. Yeah, he's not rookie eligible this year, but
yeah. But yeah, I mean, second year guy probably, or third year, if that, just based on the games that he's played. So he's still pretty young. Like he's had a ton of major league experience.
24. He's gonna be 24 years
old.
Like,
so he's young. I mean, young guy. So like he has a lot of potential, man, to really also get better. So excited. So I'm excited for him to play third. Yandy's gonna go up to first for the most part. So that should be a pretty nice infield at least defensively with Paredes at third.
Mm-hmm. I have pretty much the same read on this situation. Everybody wants the prospect to come up and be an all-star and be a really flashy guy and buy his jersey. Everybody wants that story to happen. Much more realistic is that Paredes is the everyday guy there, that he has another pretty good season, pretty productive season. The one role that I could see Curtis Mead filling for Tampa Bay this season, and I think it could be a really important role, even if it doesn't earn him a lot of national recognition, is in some platoon where he gets to face left-handed pitching. We look at what he did against lefties last year in the minor leagues. He obliterated them. And these are small-ish sample sizes, but they've held true throughout every level of the minor leagues. So there's more reason to think that they would continue in the majors than reason that you would think that they're just randomness. But you look at Double-A last year, batted over 407, Triple-A almost 350, had an OPS over 1,000 in both places. In 2021, we saw more of the same at the few different places that he stopped with OPS 901, 849, over 1,000 at Triple-A. To me, the Rays really, really struggled against left-handed pitching last year. That's a team that won 86 games, despite the fact that every time they went and saw a lefty, it was more or less a loss. There was a 3-2 loss. There was a 2-1 loss, stuff like that. If Curtis Mead is able to come up and make an impact with his bat, because I agree, the glove isn't there. He's not going to supplant anyone because of his defense. If he can come up and make an impact with his bat, even in a limited role, then you get a guy like Wander Franco back who can also hit left-handed pitching better than what you were throwing out there last year. That's, in my mind, 2 or 3 wins right there. And you can see on the ticker on the bottom of the screen, you're thinking about, can they get to 88, 89, 90 wins?
Yes.
I don't know how they fall below 90 unless we see a cascade of injuries, unless we see McClanahan go down, and then Glasnow ends up having a setback in his recovery, and Eflin's not healthy, and Patino and Chirino, some of the depth guys aren't healthy, which is a lot, right? I think a lot has to go wrong for the Tampa Bay Rays to have a poor season because they're so fundamentally sound, because they have so much depth, because even if things do go wrong, there's this seeming never-ending process to where they can just go get a guy for the bullpen that has a fastball slider combo and get quality innings out of them. They can go pluck guys from other organizations that can come in and at least provide competitive at-bats. They won't completely embarrass themselves up there. There's a lot of reasons to like this team. And
they're deep. They're deep. This season I think we're a lot more deep, just offensively and just pitching wise, than we were last year, for sure, by far. I mean, we're replacing a guy like Kevin Kiermaier as well, right? He's been in the lineup the last, great Tampa Bay Ray for a while, but I'm really excited about Siri. I love that guy. I love his energy. I love what he brings to the table. And at this stage, a better defender than Kiermaier, whether you like it or not. I mean, Kiermaier is great, but I also feel like Siri has much more greater offensive potential than Kiermaier ever had, So,
in addition to just being able to stay on the field, because Kiermaier deserves all the flowers in the world for his elite defensive highlight reels over the season, but we'd be remiss to sit here and give him credit for all of it, because there was a lot of balls that maybe he didn't get a great jump on that he ended up having to dive for, run into a wall because he was a little bit late to, and then he ends up on the injured list. And then maybe he's a little bit less effective at the plate because his shoulder's not at 100% and things like that. And Siri's only 27 years old. And when you look at some of the stuff that he was able to do last year, 100 percentile sprint speed, the defense was 99th percentile. The exit velos were great. Going to be able to steal bases, going to be able to create chaos going first to third, second to home. Center field is locked down. So especially in a place like the Trop where left field is comparatively, it's a small place for Arozarena to make mistakes. It's not going to kill you over there.
Yeah.
If Siri can go and get everything that's his in the gaps, that's a nice asset to have there, and a guy that I don't think a lot of people are talking about. He will.
No, he will. He will. I mean, the dude is. I love watching him play defense. Like, it is fun to watch. Like, just his jumps, his speed. I mean, the dude is if he doesn't win a Gold Glove this season, if he plays the games that he needs to play and he's in the lineup every day, like where I'm expecting him to be, there's no reason why he should not be in the Gold Glove conversation. Probably Platinum Glove kind of guy. I mean, the dude is just outstanding, and he's that good defensively. Now offensively, he's a little crazy, a little wild, in terms of like, his approach at the plate. But I think he will have more to me of an offensive impact than Kiermaier, right? Would have, even if Kiermaier was coming into the season of the Rays. He's with the Blue Jays now, but I'm really excited about Jose Siri, especially if we can keep him, towards the bottom. I've been seeing the Rays play him a lot of leadoff this spring, which is interesting because I was not expecting that. Just based on just kind of his
North
crazy
of a
approach at the
30% K
plate.
rate. That's a tough
Yeah.
guy to have taking the
So,
first at bat of the game
I
all
was
the
a
time.
little surprised. I was surprised, but they keep putting him, pencil him in the leadoff spot. So maybe there's something there that Kevin Cash, is looking at. But I was expecting him more so to be at the bottom, kind of a second leadoff in the ninth spot, something like that, where he can really, start off an inning and steal a base, draw a walk, and just, like you said, create havoc in the bases. Another guy that I can see stealing 20 bases easily. Like if he's able to get on base, he will steal a lot of bases. Like, so again, that's why another reason, like the Rays are going to be able to generate a lot more offense than people think, just of this, a lot of the rule changes, like not the shift and like the ability to steal base and generate, this extra base here and there, that I think will help a team like the Rays, the most. So
And let's think about all of these rule changes. I'm glad you brought them up again before we get out of here. Who was the first team to start shifting at a high rate? The Tampa Bay Rays. Who was the first
Joe
team to
Madden.
start? Joe Madden. Who was the first team to start using an opener on a regular basis and to start rethinking bullpen strategy? The Tampa Bay Rays.
Yep.
In a season where there's so much room for innovation, for trying new things, do we really think the Tampa Bay Rays are not going to be able to execute at a higher level than at least 25 other teams in baseball?
Yeah, they were already working on stuff last season, already anticipating some of this rule changes. Because I've been watching a lot of their interviews with Kevin Cash, and even late last season, he was already talking about, well, we were doing this that way because we don't know that next season the rules are going to be this way, and so on and so on. So they were already thinking of that. But yeah, the shift, Joe Madden, he started the whole kind of like trend. It just kind of blew up. The opener, like I'm a big bullpen guy. I love those days. I think those days are great. I just enjoy the matchups and like, going through the thought process with like the manager. Okay, he's gonna go with this guy in this spot, this guy in that spot, and it's just fun to watch. So I'm not one of those people that hate it. Like I truly enjoy when we have a bullpen day, because also I'm spoiled because like I know our bullpen is pretty good. So I know we're gonna throw out there like 7 to 8 guys that are just elite, disgusting guys. So it's not gonna be fun for the other team, but it'll be fun for us to watch.
Yeah, absolutely. It'll be a 3-2 game. The Rays will have a shot to win.
It's like, yeah,
95% of people will say it's a boring game, and then there'll be the 5% of people that are like really in the thick of things, understand who these people are, and
yeah,
it's
no,
a
it's
it's a
fun, man.
winning strategy,
Fun.
man. But that's what I'm
It
saying.
is.
And then, and like the one guy we didn't even get to yet, he's not going to be someone that is particularly fantasy relevant. Definitely won't win an MVP. Won't be in the conversation for any of those accolades. But we mentioned the struggles as a team last year against left-handed pitching. A guy like Manuel Margot, who is
Oh,
overall a below average bat, but better against left-handed pitching, an area where the team was deficient last year, plays solid defense at 3 different outfield positions, only played 90 games last year. And this is another guy. We mentioned Zach Eflin, where you were surprised to get that notification on your phone that they committed $40 million to Zach
I
Eflin.
know.
Well, Manuel Margot is the team's most expensive hitter going into
I know.
2023 on a roster that
I
has
know.
Wander Franco and a couple a Yandy Diaz and some other guys that you mentioned you're excited to watch. This is the guy who they're paying the most money to.
Yep. And it's something to be said, but I'll tell you what, he's probably our most clutch hitter, like he comes up, I feel like every time that we need a big hit, it's Margot, right? It's his, somehow, some way, he's up to bat, and it's somehow he delivers every single time. But again, another guy, and that's why I'm just excited to watch this team just play together, just more cohesiveness in terms of more games together, and like just being able to, because when baseball is one of these games that you build off of each other, right?
Mhm.
So one guy is in a hot streak and is doing well, seeing the ball well, is setting you up for you to have a much better at bat after him, and so on and so forth, right? So building that, I think it's just games that they need to be playing together with the same lineup, same group of guys, just getting adjusted to that and building, which we didn't have a chance to do that last year. It was just always like, oh, this guy's out, these two guys are out here, and then this guy for another 10 games and 15 games, 20 games. So we were never able to really get into a rhythm as a lineup ever. We had Taylor Walls from like every lineup. I mean, come on, that was already an out. We already starting every game with already 3 automatic outs because we knew that this guy was gonna get 3 outs. So, but yeah, man, I'm excited for that. Josh, another guy that we haven't even spoken about is the other Lowe, Josh Lowe or
Yep.
Lowe. I think it's Lowe or Lowe. I'm not
It's
sure,
really
but
confusing. They really need to just
yeah,
pick one pronunciation
yeah,
and roll with
man.
both of
So,
them.
but Josh is another guy that I think Kevin Cash and the organization are pretty big on. Um, struggle mightily hitting the fastball. I mean, he could not hit anything over 95 miles per hour. Like if you had a 95 plus mile per hour fastball and you would throw that to him, it was most likely going to whiff. Like it was just he could not do it. But he's one of those guys that he's too good for AAA at this point in his career. But he goes down there and is just destroys the league. But then he comes up to the major leagues and it's not quite there yet, right?
Mhm.
As far as like what I saw last season, this spring he's been playing much better from what I've been seeing and just kind of reading. Um, and the good thing is, a lot of people realize that as a hitter, like if you're struggling and that what the pitch that you're struggling with is the fastball, you can make adjustments for that. Like you can make certain changes to your swing, but you'll be able to get to hitting the fastball on a consistent
Mhm.
basis.
And it's
But
possible that it could be a timing thing, which is
yeah,
if any adjustment that a hitter could make, timing is by far the easiest thing to correct. And that's a great stat that you brought up with the struggle against the fastball because for a guy to have a 291 weighted on base against the fastball is horrific. The fastball is usually the pitch that guys will crush and then they can't hit the breaking ball, they can't hit the off speed stuff, and that's what
correct.
limits their ceiling. So a guy that proved that he's not totally inept against breaking pitches and off-speed pitches, maybe that's a pitch that he'll just continue to struggle with throughout his career. That's not a death sentence.
Nope.
If he can learn how to hit the fastball, which I 100% agree with you, is a correctable deficiency in his game, especially for a guy who had been so productive at the upper levels of the minor leagues.
Yeah.
That's another guy who's post hype potentially going to make a huge impact for a team that won 86 games last year. We keep talking about how last season was so disappointing on so many levels.
Yeah. No.
They won 86 games. They didn't have good health. They didn't
No.
have high-end production from anyone, anywhere on the roster other than the bullpen, and they still won 86 games.
Yeah, man, and that's another guy that I'm really just excited to watch, just to see what his progression has been from last time that we saw him. I mean, after he came back up, I think the second time, you could start to see some minor adjustments to his swing, and he was starting to make more contact. Hard contact, it was just right at people. There's nothing you can do with that, but you could start to see some of that. And I think this season is going to be a big season for him. I'm not saying that he's going to come out here and just be, out of this world. But I think he will be serviceable. I think he's going to be someone that you can plug in the lineup and you can still be productive from, a couple of times out of the week, have some big games.
Mhm.
I mean, elite speed, great outfielder, has all the tools you want. I mean, and he's young, another young piece, to the puzzle
Mhm.
that we just have a lot of young guys that are just, to me, are ready to just for that breakout. I mean, talking about Franco, this guy breaks out. You're talking about Brandon Lowe having a bounce back season. You're talking about Margot staying healthy. So now you're Paredes, building off of what he did last season. Randy. So our lineup's starting to sound a lot deeper, right? Than typically
Mhm.
you would think in years past. But still, people are like, no, like the Rays are not gonna hit anything. I'm like, okay, sure. I mean, we'll just kind of sit back and see what happens again.
We shall see. I mean, you
Yeah,
mentioned loud that the month of July here, we're looking 77 plate appearances, 304 batting average, had a decent number of extra base hits with the slug approaching 500 there.
yep,
It's these guys are young. These guys are really young baseball players. Josh Lowe is a former number 13 overall pick, first round draft pick not too
yeah,
long ago. And someone that hit 20 plus home runs in just over 100 games at AAA in 2021, went back there last year, had 14 home runs in 80 games. So it's not always the most linear progression to stardom. We get so used to seeing the NBA
correct.
guys like Ja Morant come in and be a
Yeah,
superstar right away. The LeBron Jameses of the world, where they come in and they completely transform a franchise. That's not always the case in baseball, and especially in recent years when we've seen Ronald Acuna's come up and be sensational right away. Even a guy on his own team, Wander Franco, who comes up and gets that long-term extension, that pre-arb deal. I think it makes you expect that Lau's going to come
yes,
in and be elite right away. And if he's not, then he's a total failure.
no,
Now, without all the pressure of the media on him every single day, he's not going to be the guy who has to give a quote every single time he strikes out. Mentally, he could probably be in a lot better space. And you putting him in a role where he can thrive. It might not be an everyday role, but again, platooning him where maybe he's better against righties and Margot's
exactly.
better against lefties, stuff like that. The Rays are not going to be the most sexy lineup in baseball, but I think it's ridiculous for anyone to argue that they're going to remain static. This is a lineup that has far more potential going into 2023 than they had last year, in my
Yeah,
opinion.
yeah, way more, man, and that's what it is, right? It's potential until you actually go out there and you execute and you actually do what you're supposed to do. It's all about potential, and that's what I'm really just excited about, just to see what they look like, as soon as they stay healthy. And I think they're all been talking about that. They're all talking about like how last season was just one of those years where just health was just not,
Mhm.
unfortunately, just injury after injury, and it's just that stuff happens. But yeah, that back to your point, we won 86 games with all of that. 88.5 wins. I think that's definitely doable. I mean, like I said, I just don't see ourselves losing less than 90. Winning less than 90 games. And of course, I mean, I'm not taking anything away from the AL East because we play in arguably one of the toughest divisions in the whole baseball. You got the Yankees will still be there. They got some pitching help. You got the Blue Jays. Their offense is always going to be there. But you know what's funny, man? Every time that we go into any of those games, I know it's going to be a 4-2 game, or like, it's not going to be a slugfest like most people think. Oh, Blue Jays, Rays, and no, it's going to be probably a slow scoring game from
Yep.
both sides because that's what the Rays do. They just make it ugly. And at the end of the day, all right, well, let's see what bullpen comes out on top. It might be like 2-2 on the seventh, and like
Mhm.
something happens. So like I'm never like from a Rays fan perspective, like I'm never afraid to face the Yankees or the Blue Jays or Boston because like or any team really because like I know that our pitching can hang with any lineup. Like
Mhm.
pitching will, if you have great pitching, doesn't matter what lineup you put out there. Like most likely the pitching staff is going to come out on top. It's just
Yep.
that hard
Especially in
to
modern
hit in
baseball.
baseball, man. Yeah,
The big data era of baseball has benefited pitching so much more than it has benefited
yeah.
hitters. So having the rotation that you guys have, having the bullpen that you guys have, there's never a game where the Tampa Bay Rays are going to be a plus 200 underdog on the money line. It just won't happen.
No, and if there are, I mean, it's just you just take the race for that game and just see what happens. Like, don't
Yeah.
don't ever do that. I mean, this is gonna be, and leads me to my next point in terms of like my biggest advice for I guess for this season as you guys go into it is, learn to adjust. It's gonna be don't think, that's one thing that I try to keep in perspective is every season is gonna be different. The outcomes are going to be different. Like you mentioned, you didn't do any K props before last season. You might not do K props this season. You might get into a different market because you're going with the flow of how things are changing and like what you're seeing. So, my biggest advice is just figure out what market works for the 2023 season, right? Don't kind of like build off and just 2022 I did great in this particular market. I'm gonna do great again because it might not happen. So
especially with all the
but
rule
yeah, man.
changes. I think that's great
Yeah.
advice.
What do you
There's
think about the rule changes? Do you like them?
I love the bigger bases from a player safety perspective. The product is better when you can keep your star players healthy and on the field. The bigger bases, bringing back more stolen base attempts is also a huge boon. It's a fun part of the game. It increases a lot of the strategy. Maybe this is me, a more like the more of the nerd, the more like intellectually archetype of a fan, but I love that stuff. I love seeing guys on first base late in the game or even in the third inning. And I'm sitting here and I'm going through my brain. If he does this, then this could happen. And we have maybe Yandy coming up 2 batters from now. So having that guy on second, you give yourself a better opportunity to get him home, stuff like that. So I love the bigger bases. I love what that's going to do to initiate more action in that area of the game.
Yep.
The shift, I think, sort of we're forced into it because it became abundantly clear that hitters were never going to
Yeah.
adjust, and it hurt the enjoyment of the sport for the casual fan. I hate the idea of rewarding hitters who never adjusted to defenses that took away one of their strengths, but we've seen it in other sports and people forget about it eventually where like Shaq, you can't hack a Shaq anymore. You can't hack a Dwight Howard. They
Yeah.
took that out of it where it was a technical foul when you did that, especially within the last
Yep.
2 minutes of game. So I think that'll be fine. And I think from just a general baseball perspective, it's more fun to see really hard hit baseballs find the grass instead of finding
Yep.
gloves. So that'll increase the scoring. Last year was the lowest scoring that we've seen in 50 years in Major League Baseball. So it's not fun, especially because most of those runs were home runs or scored in extra innings because of that zombie runner. So those two rules I like a lot. The pitch clock is a rule that I'm struggling to get behind, not because I disagree with the objective of it. I like the idea of speeding up the game a little bit, but I hate the punishment for it. I hate the automatic strikes and the automatic balls. I
Yeah.
hate that
I
we're
agree.
ending innings that way. People who look at the data that we're talking about in this video and other videos, people who look at that stuff all the time realize the tremendous difference between starting account 0-1 versus being
I
behind
know.
an account 1-0.
Yeah.
That kind of stuff doesn't sit well with me. I think that fundamentally changes the game of baseball in a way that I can't wrap my head around. So I'm not a huge fan of that. My biggest hope for it is just that pitchers and hitters adjust to it and we don't see a lot of penalties. If we don't see a
Yeah.
lot of penalties, I'll probably be okay with it. I probably won't be bitching too much during the season, but that's where I'm standing on those. I think
But
overall it'll be a
you
good
know it's
season.
gonna happen though, especially at I think the start of the season. There'll be a lot of new adjustments, and I think the shift. It'll be fun, like you said. The shift is. I like the fact that they got away from got rid of it. It just became so, like you said. But at the same time, it's like I can never understand. Dude, just hit the other way. Like
I just
you're a
bunt the ball
professional.
past the
You're a
pitcher. Yeah.
professional hitter. Like this is what you've done your whole life. Where like I remember I would never forget. Probably 10 years ago. So the Yankees have spring training down here in Tampa, and I was watching Robinson Cano take BP, and he was with the coach, and like literally for 20 minutes, the coach would be like, "All right, go to left field, just hit left field. Go to right field." And every single time, this dude was just like, "Where do you want me to put the ball? Oh, center field, center field." And I'm like, these guys have the ability to do that. If they really wanted to, they could be, you know what? I'm going to go the other way tonight. Like, if they're going to keep doing the shift, I'm going to go the other way. But at the same time, it makes it fun for guys like, let's talk about the Rays, like Brandon Lowe. Huge benefit for him, not having the shift. I mean, sometimes he would hit balls that are just, destroyed right in the second baseman that is like playing,
Out in
halfway
right field.
down
Yeah.
in right field. So it's like, okay, well, so I think that would be a big help for like someone like him and his average and be get on base more. So I think that will help. But yeah, the pitch clock, man, I'm not a big fan. I don't think anyone's a big fan of the pitch clock. I don't think I ran into anyone that's like, I love the pitch clock. But
At
I
least
do
not
see
anybody
why
that
it's
watched the game last year. I think a lot of casuals have liked it, and I don't say casuals in a derogatory way. I think it's having that desired impact from what I've seen of like people who didn't watch baseball before now like the pace of it, but people who really enjoy the nuances of baseball have been
correct.
irritated. I
And I
didn't mean to
think
cut
it's
you
gonna
off.
no, you're good. And I think it's gonna be a big adjustments for both pitchers and hitters.
Mhm.
I don't think it's necessarily just the pitching. Um, But yeah, man, I don't know. I just like you said, I don't like the punishment for them. Like you said, like if ending a game like that I would lose my mind. I mean, if that happened to the Rays and we're like in a big game or something, and like you just no, like that's unacceptable. Like MLB will have to probably do something, especially in the playoffs, because you don't want a playoff game ending like that. Like so how is that going to work? In a playoff game, are you going to really, really going to the ump is really going to no, that's just it can't happen. So
I agree.
we'll see.
The people I've talked to that work in minor league ballparks have said because the rules have obviously been implemented in the minors the last couple of years. They said it wasn't a big deal. Every so often it would happen, and then you just move on to the next pitch. But the the big difference is there's not 150,000 people watching every single minor league baseball game the way there are major league baseball games, and that's even in small markets, right? The teams like the Rays might not do great with attendance at the ballpark. There's still a lot of people that watch those games from all
Yes.
over the country that are going to be tuned into these things. The PR nightmare of the imagine a team like the Yankees losing a game to a team like the Rays or the Rockies or a team
Yeah.
that has the Yankees fan base will think there's no way we should lose to this team, and then they lose because they feel
Correct.
like it's an injustice of the rule. And then there's going to be a debate about the timing and did he have an extra half a second and the umpire screwed up. So I think there's going to be some huge PR nightmares if these guys are not fully adjusted by the time the season gets here. We'll see what happens. I hope that
Yeah.
Rob Manfred, if there is very clearly a need to make this like an 18-23 instead of a 15-second, 20-second clock, I hope if there's a need to just expand it by a few seconds, they just make that adjustment in April or May
Correct.
instead of trying to persevere through 162 games in a postseason.
Yeah, I agree. And I think it might be just one of those things that I think you will have change during the season. And I think it will come from the players, and even managers, kind of
Mhm.
like saying, "Hey, guys, we can't really have this." But I like I like the concept behind it, like trying to speed up the game. Like I do agree, baseball can get really, really long, at
Mhm.
times. I don't agree with the ghost runner. I hate the ghost runner rule. I hate that they're keeping it. I wish they would have just kept playing regular baseball maybe through like the 10th, 11th, and maybe in the 12th at the Ghost
Mhm.
Runner kind of thing. That was kind of my sentiment. I was kind of in that group where like I feel like they should have just stayed with the regular game until maybe the 12th inning kind of thing. But I get it. I do get the point of it, like pitching stabs and just like the hours that I mean, I've watched games with the Rays that are like 5 hours long. It starts at 7, it's like midnight. I'm like, okay, like, it's time to go.
Yeah.
But
And on that note too, there was an interesting article on Baseball Prospectus that took a systematic look at that because one of the objectives with that ghost runner, zombie runner, whatever term you want to use for extra innings was so that teams who played those long extra inning games weren't completely ravaged for the next 3 days, 4 days, 5 days going forward because they used every
yeah,
available arm in their bullpen.
pitching.
And what we saw was teams have recovered better. They had prior to this rule change, if you were in one of those long extra inning games, you tended to have a huge discrepancy between your expected win probability and what your actual win probability ended up being following the
Yeah,
extra inning games. Last year, we saw a much better correction in that. Same thing with 2021. So that rule seems to have had the intended impact, but I think I say that because I think it's similar to the pitch clock of it will have the desired impact. Of course, the games will get quicker. We've seen in
yeah,
spring training where the games are getting quicker. Of course, the regular season games will be sped up, but at what cost, right?
correct.
And maybe this is just me being like a really old 25-year-old thinking in antiquated ways, but I like baseball. I like watching baseball. I like what baseball stands for. I like that
Same.
when you watch a baseball game, when you watch the NBA, you want to be entertained every single second. You want to be seeing dunks. You want to be seeing athletic passes, athletic movements, stuff like that.
Yes,
In baseball, a lot of the fun for people watching baseball is watching it with friends, thinking about the strategy in between pitches, thinking about what pitch might be thrown, thinking about should this guy steal a base, thinking about what's going to happen in the next half inning. So, where a lot of people, I think, thought of Major League Baseball as having to fill inaction in between pitches, at least speaking for myself, I don't ever think there was inaction. There's certainly guys that would take 35, 40 seconds on occasion to throw a baseball, and you're like, Jesus Christ, throw get it out of your hand. And so that's why I'm in favor of something to speed up the game in that regard. But I don't like the punishment. I don't like that it's so strict. I don't like that there's no warnings. I don't like that it's so severe, because you're introducing a fundamentally different idea of baseball, the way that a ghost runner in second base changes the dynamic of the game itself. And I think this is the most extraordinary rule change that I've seen in my lifetime. And I hope it doesn't fundamentally change the way we watch the game. And maybe I'm being a little bit hyperbolic and a little bit fearful, but I will be sick if we're seeing what's happening in spring training still happening in June, July, and August. I just don't think that's the way the game's supposed to be played.
No, I agree. I agree 100%, man. And I think, it's like I see, like you mentioned, I get the point behind it, but I just don't. It's just too severe. Like some of the stuff that's happening, I'm just like, oh, okay, like that's just no way that can happen. Like, in a regular season game. So I'm hoping that they can just maybe, and I like the fact that they're having conversations. I was watching the spring training game, and like the ump was saying, no, I messed up. I shouldn't have done that. Or like, we'll take that into the notes and we'll pass it along. So like, I like the fact that they're figuring things out as they go. But also spring training, I mean, we only got like 2.5 weeks left, maybe 3 before real games start. So like, it's really got a lot of time to to get it right. So
yeah, and a lot of these guys are going to play in the World Baseball Classic where they're not using these new rules.
I love it. I love the Classic, man. I hope you're going to be watching. That's going to be, I went to the last Classic. I went to USA versus DR in Miami, and that was nuts. So, I got actually, let me show you. Got my just got my jersey in recently for Puerto Rico. I don't know if you can see it, but
that's awesome.
It's going in and out. But yeah, I got the jersey, so I'm ready to rock it. Our team is not as good, but we'll be there.
Yeah, man, we'll have to do some more content for the people, or maybe a collab or something on the WBC. But
for sure, man, I would love that. USA stacked, by the way. I was watching the roster, looking at the roster. They're stacked.
They are. I'm excited. It starts on Tuesday for people who are unaware. It should be a really, really exciting event. But B-Flo, man, before we get out of here, I know you've already given us your lean on the over 88.5 wins. Yes. Can we be even more bullish with this team? Is there any value on them to win the division at plus 400? Any value on them to win the pennant or the World Series at those longer odds? Or are we just going over 88.5 wins here?
So obviously, if I was, I'm a betting guy, so I would probably do a whole unit on the total. Like that will, to me, that is a full unit, probably even. To me, that's as solid as bet as you can get. 88.5 wins. That's going to happen. Now, to win the AL East, obviously, I like to think that we have a good chance to win the AL East, but at the same time, the Rays are dealing with so many players that we're counting on for them to be consistent to a point when it comes to injury-wise that we don't know if this is a year that we really do get this roster to play their full set of innings together, full set of games together. It comes down to that. If those guys can stay healthy for the most of the season, yes, we do have a chance to go back to winning the division. We do have a chance to, making it. To me, I mean, with the pitching stuff that we have, there's no reason why we wouldn't have a chance to win the division at least. And then from there, we have the Astros are still going to be pretty solid. The Mariners are underway, to have a, make it a threat. But then you still got 3 teams in our division that are just it's Red Sox. I haven't really dove into Boston. I know they've done a couple of things. The Yankees and the Blue Jays, right? Yes, I mean division wise, plus 400. That's I think that's pretty good value. Honestly, I don't think it's a crazy number, but it all depends on our health. If we're healthy, I can sit here and tell you confidently that I do think we can make a run way farther than not just winning the division. I think we can win the American League. Obviously, I don't want to face the Dodgers again. If we do make it to the World Series, I'm sick of them. Now the Padres and whoever comes from the National League, there's some squads out there, but as good of a chance of any team in the American League though to make it to the World Series. I'll tell you that much. Just with their depth and just the fact that I'm just counting on a really big bounce back year offensively. I think our pitching, you can always count on that, and I think and everyone knows, comes playoff times, pitching is what's going to win you those games. At the end of the day, late innings, these late games that you got these guys in high leverage positions that the Rays got. I'm confident that we can go in there and do what we need to do. Last year we couldn't beat your team, the Indians, because we just could not hit at all. But it was just like,
it was also
pitching
28 degrees in game 2 of that series.
Yeah, crazy, man. And I think our pitching staff still held, their own with you guys. Obviously, you guys are not the most, offensively talented team either. So always going to be a 2-1, 4-1 games kind of thing. But I think this year's a little bit different for us. I think this year I think the expectation around the Rays is that, at least locally here, from what I'm reading on the team, is that our offense should be able to help our pitching staff a lot more than they did. So yeah, I would say if I'm me, obviously I'm going to take him all the way through. So, I'm a Rays fan, so I'm always going to go with them. But yeah, man, it's just like I always tell my friends, everyone that I always talk about the Rays, pitching wins, and we will always have that. Doesn't matter, doesn't matter what we do around that. I think we got the guys. We'd even talk about Taj Bradley, honestly, and when we talk about pitching staff, and that dude is a stud. Like, he's gonna come up in probably September, to bolster that team, the expansion team, and just be a monster. The dude is just filthy. So another guy that you.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that like that's another guy. If you're able to manage his innings effectively throughout the year, that getting the Rays right now at 12-1 to win the pennant, you add a fresh young arm who has high velo, who you might be able to put in the bullpen or in like an Andrew Miller-esque role down during the month of October. I think could be a real weapon, especially for a team like the Rays that understands leverage so well, that understands when to press certain buttons and when to press other buttons. For me, the over 88.5 wins will probably be my largest investment in the futures market preseason. I simply don't understand how this line is where it is. I think this is when you think about how lines are put together, sports books have to factor in a couple of things. One, public perception. You can't price the Rays at 91 or 92 wins because looking at their roster, so many people are unfamiliar with the vast majority of these names. They're going to take too much liability on the under at that number. So that's one thing they're baking in here. Two, they're baking in the fact that the Rays have a lot of injury risk. We've already seen it with Glasnow. We see it we've talked about it extensively with a lot of these other guys on the roster. So that's something that they're also baking in here. They're also in a division that is very tough, as you mentioned, with the Yankees, the Blue Jays. I'm not as high on the Red Sox, but the Orioles are emerging as well. So at minimum, you have 5 teams that should win 70 games, push 75, 80 games. For me, the Rays over 88.5 wins should be a slam dunk if they're even remotely healthy, for all the reasons that we've talked about the last 2 hours. Can't believe it's been that long of a conversation. To win the division, if they're healthy, it sounds ridiculous to say that they can take down a team like the Yankees that's spending out the ass every single year, that their payroll is consistently top 3, top 5 in baseball. But you mentioned over 162 games, pitching wins. And Tampa Bay has more pitching than I think anybody else in this division. Tampa Bay is very fundamentally sound. They've gotten better defensively going into 2023 just by virtue of health and by having a guy like Siri in center field instead of Kiermaier, small stuff like that. They're really, really strong up the middle with Betancourt at catcher, with Franco at short, and then Siri in center, which is where you build the crux of a really great defense. And then analytically speaking, I don't know if you can say there's a team better equipped in baseball to take advantage of all of these rule changes. You had some great information about the Rays prepping last year for these rule changes in anticipation. Got it on the third try. Anticipation for 2023. I that is something that books will never price into it. They're not going to price in the idea that Mark Tompkins telling us that the organization is going to focus more on swing decisions than they are on launch angle and mechanical stuff. They're not talking about the fact that the Rays have also bucked another trend this year that typically teams will set up their locker room, pitchers on one side, position players on another. This year, the Rays are mixing everybody. They want more continuity in the team. They want these guys to interact across silos. They want them to be playing more for each other and not just for the pitchers, not just for the hitters. Stuff like that that's behind paywalls, that you have to pay for local journalism, that you have to go find via the beat writers. That's stuff that's not baked into the line. So us sitting here saying over 88.5 wins, there's a lot more research that we've done that the vast majority of the public has not done. So the sportsbook knows that this might not be the sharpest line in the world, but there's other business considerations here that have this number lower, which I think give us an opportunity to get a line probably 2 wins too low on the open market.
I agree, man. I can't agree. Everything you just said, laid it out perfectly. I mean, again, this line, but it's always kind of like this with the Rays. Every year, you're going to get a line it's going to be a lot of value in the team total with the Rays year in and year out because of what you mentioned. A lot of people don't know the names that we have. They don't really. There's no way, because if you don't really keep up with, in the local market, like you mentioned, with the local beat writers, so there's no way you can get to know the team as a whole, right? You just Randy Arozarena is probably the one name that most people just kind of recognize on top of the head, right? If you talk about the Rays, but he's not even, one of the guys that we're like extremely like high on. This is everyone else around that we discussed. But yeah, man, 88.5, I think is just, like you said, slam dunk, take it to the bank and enjoy your dinner after your season, kind of thing. But I'm excited, man. I'm just excited for baseball overall. Really excited for some of these younger teams that are coming up. Like, I'm not a baseball fan, so like even the Orioles, they're really fun to watch. They got some studs out there. And then even another team that I really enjoy watching, the Mariners. They're fun. They're fun to watch. So like I really enjoy just baseball as a whole, and hopefully we'll have some more chats. As the season goes, just talk about just baseball. Not just Rays stuff too.
Absolutely, man. Well, I appreciate you taking some time to join us. I know a couple hours is not always easy to fit into people's schedules, so really appreciate you coming and sharing your knowledge and helping people get a little bit more insight into the Tampa Bay Rays going into 2023. I have B-Flo's social information posted in the description below on this video. Make sure you go check him out on Twitter.
Yes.
He posts gold every single day for free. He's transparent. He's accountable. He's there for the people. He learns out in the public. People can see when he has good weeks, bad weeks, and how he pivots and recovers from that. So one of my favorite people on Twitter for sure. I think he'll be one of your favorites if you give him a follow. Definitely underrated, much like the Tampa Bay Rays. So
there you go.
So appreciate everyone.
Thank you, man. Of course, thank you guys, and thank you for listening. I know it's been a long 2 hours, but hopefully you guys get some info as you just kind of make a smart decision as you make your bets going into the MLB season. There's going to be a lot of changes, so keep up with it, and, good luck.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys for tuning in. As always, if you find the content valuable, please like, share, subscribe, tell a friend, all of that good stuff. Until next time, good luck. Thank you for tuning in, and we'll keep grinding away at these 30 teams heading into opening day.
All right, man. Good luck. I'll be tuning into the other ones.
Appreciate it, man. See you, everyone.